Sunil, you're good to go.
Okay, thanks, Nagesh, and thanks, everyone. The best thing that's happening today is, in fact, I don't remember when was the last time or ever I ever spoke to this audience, even during college, presenting something to all of you. Except for maybe the Viva sessions that we all had. And that was the only time when I probably spoke in presence of a couple of you guys. But other than that, no debates, nothing. But it's a great honor, great opportunity to share my experience. Of course, I have split this presentation in two parts. One is which talks about what I'm actually doing currently in terms of entrepreneurship, startups, and what's been my learning so far. And second is, in fact, the piece where I'm going a little deep into my life and sharing what I have been, going through over the last 20, 25 years, starting right from college. So I think the initial portion would be quite generic. Some of you might be well aware, but in case you have questions in between, feel free to ask. I'm not going to be looking at the chat. If there is anything specific, please stop me and ask me immediately. But towards the end or whenever I get a chance, I'll take a look at chat and I'll respond appropriately. So how I plan to cover, I think, as I said, we'll be talking about the Indian ecosystem and going a little deeper into some of the startups and failures and success stories. This is a slightly old number. I didn't really get time to get the latest numbers, but if you look at it, between 2006 and 2018, we had 5,100 startups that got registered at MCA. And interestingly, out of that, 14 actually became unicorns. And I'll be covering some of the unicorns later in the slides. And that has been a big success. For those who aren't aware what is a unicorn, it's a company which is valued at least at $1 billion. So we already had 2014 unicorns as of 2018. I believe the number has gone up to about 26, but I'll have to check the number again. The total created value, that's actually the economic value that startups have created. That's about 90 billion. And the total funding raised by startups till 2018 was about 35, with 90,000 jobs created, which these are typically the direct jobs. There would be a lot of indirect jobs that are created, which are not covered here. As per the predictions, and this is all coming from the KREC research report, as per the predictions, by 2025, there is expectation of about 32,000 startups that would be registered. However, unfortunately, given what we have seen right from the beginning of this year with COVID-19, the gut feel is that this number would be lower. In fact, there are a lot of startups that are struggling. So in fact, there'll be a great number of startups that would be shutting down in coming months. Number of unicorns, I think, expected to touch 50, 60, which again, I don't think there's a change in the unicorns. I think this number pretty much would remain the same. But the number of startups which will be registered would be lower. The total created value, as you can see, it would be almost 4 times to about 350 billion, with roughly 130 billion, which is almost 4 times of the funding raised earlier. So that's the funding which we're talking about in the next 9 years. With 850,000 jobs, again, some of these numbers will vary depending upon the scenario that's happening. I'm going to have a quick, check on, how much you guys know about startups. So let me quickly switch to my Zoom chat. Can't really see the chat here.
Sunil, you'll see it from the top at the top where you did the sharing. You should see chat on it.
Okay.
Next to the 3 dots, maybe.
Yeah, I don't see the option there. Okay, yeah, that's it. Okay, so I think if you can, any one of you can take a chance on this. How many new startups launch every day? Any thoughts? And these numbers were kind of beginning of 2019 or mid of 2019 when we actually did the initial study. Okay, 5, 10, 400, 25. Wow, these are different numbers. Great.
In India? Is this question in India or this worldwide?
This is in India. This is in India.
I would guess 5 to 10 a day.
Yeah, that's a good number. So 3 startups that are launched every day. What percentage of startups fail?
99.
Wow, that's a wild guess. 90, 80, 90. Pretty good. It's actually 90% of the startups that fail. We'll go deeper into some of the failures, the reasons for failure. Okay, what are the primary reasons for failure? Any guesses? This is actually a tricky one.
The primary disconnect between the conceptualized idea and the market need.
Very good. That's a beautiful one. Money, cash flow, no business model, customer, lack of business model, revenue, fitment, vision. Really interesting. So actually, it's primarily lack of market research and innovation, which does cover a lot of areas. So again, we'll go deeper into it. I mean, some of it is basically, you have not done enough study about the idea, and you started building the product directly. What percentage of startups get VC funding? 30, 10%. Okay. I'm looking for a percentage. Yeah. 75%. 1. Okay. 2 of the 1,000 startups that get funded, by the way. And this we are talking VC funding. There are a lot of different stages of funding, right from friends and family. Bootstrapped, of course, is when you put your own money in, and then friends and family and the angel rounds and so on. Okay. We'll switch to the next slide. What's common among these startups? Any guesses? What's common among these startups?
All of them failed.
Okay. Very interesting. I think you got it right. So as you can see, there's a big list: Flipkart, TaskBob, Rodder. I'm sure most of these you wouldn't have heard of. Fairfun, if you did. Stayzilla, some of you must have. PaperTap, I'll be talking. BP, I'll be talking a bit. Yes, most of these actually fail. They're non-existent. I won't call them failure, but they are non-existent anymore. We'll quickly touch upon PepperTap. What happened with PepperTap. As you can see, I think this was a hyper-local grocery delivery model that was started in 2014. It got good funding. You can see 51 million. However, it got shut down in 2016. If you see the top reasons for failure, I mean, they actually grew too fast, too soon, without having a proper, scalability product or operations. They grew to 31 cities. They had very high cash burn, very high delivery cost. And this is, a very important thing, very high delivery cost, marketing and promotions. They actually were spending a lot of money on marketing and promotion, and they were actually burning a lot of cash day in, day out. They were buying the products at MRP, selling a discount, just trying to do the customer acquisition, which is not a very sustainable model. You can very well do that during the initial phase of the startup, but if you start, not turning around where you start making money on every transaction, you will end up, being out of the business sooner or later. BP is another one, which again, used car marketplace. This relates to the discussion that we were having earlier, that there wasn't enough market research. They actually started with something which did not have a business, requirement. If you'll understand, I mean, there's a simple question to all of you. Would you ever buy a car through a third party that says, okay, I'll find the car for you and I'll do all the registration and we'll do a home delivery of the car? So it's very unlikely, because, you would not, most of the consumers would prefer to look at these cars, touch them, feel them, drive them, test out multiple cars, negotiate a bit, get involved. But this is actually a very engaged process for consumers. You're trying to ease up the process, which is not necessarily what consumers were looking for. They also had issues with their delivery, car registration, etc. Some of the other issues that they face, I mean, if you look at the 140 million that they raised, they ended up spending the money on things that were not required. They started giving large salaries to founders, bought very expensive furniture, and there was totally mismanagement of the funds that they had raised. So two different discussions we had on two startups. Quickly jumping on to the top reasons for failure. If you look at it, I think first and foremost, there's no market need. Many of us keep thinking, I think there is a brilliant idea. I have an idea. I want to test it out, or I want to build this product, etc. And a lot of times people actually start building on the product. They try to raise funding. The biggest mistake they do is they do not do the market research. And the market research could be in many ways. I mean, you need to look at what is the overall market, what you can tap in. I mean, there may be a big market for a particular idea or a product in a geography. It may not be in the geography that you are present in, or you may not have the resources to service to the other geography where the product is in demand. You may not have the right customers. You may not have figured out, which kind of customers to sell at what pricing. And if your pricing is too high, again, there is no market for your product. Your product could be too early in the game. There may not be a need as of today, and you're trying to, give something to the people that's not solving any of the problem for the consumers. A lot of startups, they fail because they run out of cash, which is a very common thing. Most of the people who are starting, who are bootstrapping, they actually end up having a plan for 6 months, 9 months, or they just have an idea, they want to test it out. But then the frustration kicks in because you can't build a product on your own. You have to have a team, that's working with you. There are multiple areas within the startups, right from building the product to finding the customer, sales, marketing, innovation, operations, and so on. And as you start running a farm, you have to make sure you're covering from all angles. Unfortunately, people don't plan for it. They end up burning too much of cash too soon, and they have to shut down. A lot of times there's not the right team in place for the startups. They start and they think, first of all, I think try not to get into a startup which is a single person startup because that is not a team. So you have to have a team. If you have to have a team, it has to bring in the right qualifications. It has to complement, one another. If somebody is strong on sales, the other person should be very strong on technology. The third person should be strong on, let's say, funding. So you can define different responsibility for individuals. Recommendation is you should have at least 2 or 3 people in the company minimum who you can trust, and so that people can actually cover different departments or functions of the firm. I won't go through each of these. Get out-competed, of course, very common. I think you may start with an idea, you want to be the first mover, and you come up with something which is not really up to the mark, and somebody else copies it, comes back with a better product, and that you have already generated the consumer interest, and the other person plays on that consumer interest. He has a lesser sales and marketing expense, and he takes over because consumer is already looking for such kind of a product, and yours is a better compared to, somebody else's is better compared to what you are offering, and the other person will take over the market. Pricing cost issues, of course, that's a big issue. Most of us tend to think that our product is the best, and we want to price it in the premium range, which is not a very good idea all the time. So you have to do the market research and the competitive research, figure out what category you fall in, what services and quality that you're offering before you price your product. I'll skip the rest, but I'll just read out each of these for clarity. Poor product, need lack business model, poor marketing, ignoring customers, which is a customer service issue. If you're not providing the right service to the customer, which is after sales service, you will tend to lose out. Product miss time, I talked about the early, you came in too early with your product, lose focus, disharmony, and so on and so forth. We'll touch upon some of this. One of the last two, as you can see, failure to pivot. Though it is right at the bottom, but it's extremely critical for a startup to continue to learn, to evolve, to change their business model and pivot when necessary. Because if you're not doing it, you will probably be way behind. Somebody else will pivot and come up with something which is desired by the consumer. Burnout, it is again very common. People tend to start with something in 6 months, 9 months, 15 months, 2 years, and I think they will burn out. So though it's somewhere at the bottom, but this is one of the big reasons for startups to fail. We'll move on. I'll pause for a couple of seconds. Any questions, anyone so far?
Question, Sunil. In your personal experience, I guess you are working with a lot of startups as well, right? Which of these have you noticed any anecdotes that you can share?
So I think, as you can see here, I would say no market need is a very common one because most of the startups, they have very vague idea of their product when they start. And secondly, they do not test it out. So they start building the product, they think there's a big market and they don't really understand where to sell, how to sell, who to sell. And they have not done any study about the competition. In fact, I mean, what I have realized are people who are not aware that there should be competitive study done and the market study done on the business they're getting in. They assume I have an idea and I have the best idea, and there is nobody else in the world who knows that this is what something that can be done, and they come forward and try building it out. So that's a very big gap. Secondly, I think there may be a problem which you're facing, but is that a scalable thing? So that again falls within the market need. So there may be a problem for 10 people, but is that a problem for 1 million people? Unless it's a problem for 1 million people that you can straight away target, there is no market for your product. So I'm primarily talking B2C here, but that's how I think you need to look at it. Running out of cash is again very common. I mean, trust me, as of today, we do multiple things. And one of the biggest reasons why startups are reaching out to us because we have connects to VCs and seed funds. We are not working so closely with angels any further or even angel network. But cash is one of the biggest need for most companies, whether they are startups or SMEs or of any size.
Great, thanks.
Hey, Sunil, is this chart tailored to India?
This is CB Insights, as you see right at the bottom. So it's not entirely, I think, tailored to India. This is quite generic, but more or less the reasons are similar across the board. Startups have similar issues, whether in US or India. In US, I think the funding could be a lesser, of an evil. But in India, I think funding is one of the bigger evils.
So, Sunil, one question, like when the startups fail, right? What do these founders, normally, do they go back to, I mean, any statistics about what they end up doing, go back to previous job or start another kind of venture or something?
Look, that's a very good question. In fact, that's a brilliant question. I mean, I'll be touching upon that. And in fact, when I was discussing with Ken, we spoke on exactly the same question. First of all, when you get into a startup, should you have a plan to exit? I think which will be touching later. But I think for any reason, if you have run off cash or your product is not working or something, I think you shouldn't be shying away from going back to what you can do. Because end of the day, I think, if you fail on one aspect or one relationship doesn't mean it's end of the world. Figure out if you can get back into the full-time job. If you have enough cash, maybe continue to try a different idea. I mean, as a startup or entrepreneur person, I think the first and foremost, you shouldn't be thinking of going back. If you want to build something, I'm sure there are plenty of things that you can work on. So it's just that you have to have the right team and money that allows you to sustain for a longer period, and I'm sure you'll hit the goal, in future. Longevity is important. Longer runway is extremely critical. However, if you're planning for a 6 months, 9 months, 12 months life for your startup, invariably you will look to go back, and that will make you go back to the your own corporate job. Having said that, I think a lot of the people, including me, if I can talk about my own, these light sensors, the IoT issues we are facing now. I'm sitting here, but still the light is going off. Okay, so coming back to, yes, I think I started the company in 2007 with some of my Infosys colleagues. Of course, that wasn't the best time, 2008 crisis. I will be talking about that later in the slides. And I didn't hesitate going back to a corporate job. In fact, I leveraged that very efficiently and combining my Infosys and the startup experience, I was able to crack an excellent deal. And I actually was very happy with that. So trust me, I think a startup actually is an elevation, even provided you run it with the right intent and with the right efforts. If you're actually just trying to build a company and not really serious about it, the experience has no value because you will not learn anything, and then you will start from zero again.
So, Sunil, one question. When you cover the exit plan,
Bala, your voice is weak. Can you speak louder?
Okay, let me try louder. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
When you cover the exit plan, will you be covering about whether to persevere or to exit? How do you know that this is a failure? Because we all think that before we start, we know the failure conditions, and if we hit those conditions, we can exit. But I assume like it will be extremely hard to pull it off, to make the decision to exit.
That's actually a very, very important question, Bala. I think I keep getting these questions from a lot of youngsters. And in fact, to be honest, they do not know that this question is actually in their mind also. One of the things that entrepreneurs do is they never believe that they have failed, right? I mean, I'm not born to fail. That's how I think. That's how most of the people think, right? And there's no problem in me, no problem in my product or service. People would love me. This is how we all think, right? But there is a time in a startup when you must realize that if there is no demand in the market, there is no consumer. If you are unable to find a paying customer for your product or service, you must realize that that's not the right product or idea that you should spend too much of time on. I'll be touching upon, a very crucial thing, and I keep giving this advice to a lot of startups that, there are times when you should consider failing fast. Okay, don't drag it. If you really have to test it out as quickly as you can. I'll give you an example. Let's say you have a $10,000 in your pocket. Now, if you want to, and I'm giving a very small number, $10,000, which is roughly 7.5 lakhs. This is the kind of cash that many of the startups have in their bank account. If you're starting and running a company with, let's say, $10,000, how long do you think you can survive with that kind of? What people tend to do is they don't draw, salaries, which of course many of us do, including me. But I think not drawing salary does not mean, that everything is great. I mean, can you run your home? That's the very first thing. Can you hire the team? That means, can you invest further, right? And thirdly, I think, your question is, when should I do it? I think sooner you realize, better it is. Because if you drag it too long, it will have a lot of psychological impact on you. You will be depressed. You will be dragging. Your family will not be happy. You will tend to you'll be losing temperament. So I think it's important you realize that the product is not going to be a success. I should take a break, or if not, talk to a few people who understand the market or who can give you the right advice. Do not rely on friends for advice all the time. I mean, that is something I would very clearly state when you're running a company or a startup. Do not just trust your friends and family, because friends and families, invariably, they will bring emotions and attachment. They will not tell you what is right. So engage with people who can actually be blunt and say things on your face. I mean, trust me, when I walk into some of my client meetings, and I have been talking to some CEOs and on advisory and consulting. The first and foremost thing that I tell them is, if you want me to behave like one of your board members or your team members who are not questioning you, I don't think we need to be here. I'm happy to walk out. You be ready to face the tough questions, and I'm going to be making your life difficult, because if you don't answer, that means you're hiding something or you're not willing to listen. So in either of these two cases, you'll not get the right advice from me. If you're looking for the right advice, then share the information, be transparent, and I'll tell you something and then follow. And we'll brainstorm. I'm not saying what I'm saying is always right, but this is exactly how startups need to think. They need to open up, they need to share, they need to brainstorm with people who they can trust and the people who are actually professional in this field, and then make a decision whether to continue.
Got it. Thank you, Sunil.
Any other questions, or should I move forward? And I hope I'm not going too fast. If I'm going too fast, just stop me. Okay, I think this.
Anand had a question on that earlier slide. You said a lot of the market data is not there, or market research is not there. Are there really good firms out there that you ask a question, they will do the research and give you? And second part to that question is, do you risk losing your idea? Is there a good control on the NDA process?
Okay, brilliant. Brilliant question, Anand. So first and foremost, I think we were talking about research companies. One among us is actually running a research company, Sachin Shetty. He runs a research firm. If you need help, he can help you. If he doesn't have, if he isn't covering those areas, I'm sure he will find the right people to help you do the research. So there are definitely, like Sachin, there are many other people who are running dedicated research company, and these firms are of different sizes. In fact, we do a lot of, I'm sure you would be seeing a lot of research from Deloitte and Gartner's and PwC's. But at the same time, I think these companies work at a very high level. Secondly, I think the research papers are typically very expensive. So if you do a bit of your own research, primary research, I'm sure you will get some level of information on your own. You can also pay to some of these companies, and I think the research costs sometimes are expensive, but you can easily get for about, let's say, $1,500 to $4,000, $5,000. You will get a reasonable research report that will give you an idea. More than that, I think in the startup segment, my personal opinion is that don't completely rely on these standard reports because every day something is happening, and many of these reports are 6 months or a year old. So you yourself should be doing a lot of market research on, especially within your geography and the specific problem area that you're addressing. For example, if you're talking about co-living, now that's a new market. You may not find a lot of data on co-living in the available, but if you go to the right places, you will be able to find at least 10 companies that are into co-living. And you do a little more research on those companies, you will understand their business model, even make a few calls to their sales guys and understand, how they are pricing. You can also reach out to some of their customers, make a few calls, get a few, youngsters from college, hire them as interns, give them a 2 months internship, say, can you do this kind of a research for me? So all of those things are feasible. Just to give a little flavor of what we do exactly the same. We do a lot of startup advisory, and we study their market, their competition, and we help them define their business model and financial models, pricing, product, etc. So yes, there are a lot of companies that are helping with research in these areas. I think your second question was, can you repeat, Anand?
Do you lose, does the Indian environment allow you to keep those ideas confidential when you talk to these firms and say, hey, I have this idea?
So this is a question which is asked by a lot of startups and quite regularly. People are afraid that, I have an idea, I don't want to tell it to anyone. And I would build it and then I'll come to the market. But I think we all need to understand that, for a startup, I think the time from when you have an idea to your MVP, right? That is very short. If you're trying to drag it for, let's say, 3 years, building your MVP, right, which is a minimum viable product, something that you can take to the market and get the feedback. If you're trying to build your MVP over a period of 3 years, and somebody else will require same 3 years to build that MVP, I think hiding your idea will make sense. Yeah, because you'll be 3 years ahead in terms of the entire startup life cycle. But if your idea is something which can be replicated, let's say in 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, 6 months, I think no point hiding it. Because the moment you launch, the other person does not really have to do what you have done in the 6 months. He actually can copy that in 2 months. Now, how much of the market can you acquire in 2 months? That is something you need to think of. Second, I think, is this person in your geography itself? Is he targeting the same customer? Does he have the exact same business model? Because he may know the idea, but does he know the business model as well? Does he have an efficient team that can execute that idea? Having an idea is great, but do you have the resources, right? Resources cover cash, team, as you can see right here, right on top. Has he done the market research? Does he have the business model? Does he have the cash? Does he have the team? Right? Does he know how to price his products? Because all of this requires a lot of time to improve. If he's copying, I'm certain if he's exceptional, maybe he'll come up with a better product than yourself. Otherwise, he probably will be struggling even to get the first cut out in the first 3 months, which is matching your specs. So I personally don't think hiding an idea has any value. So let that be out of your mind. In fact, I mean, more and more people you speak with, you will be able to validate whether there is a market or not. Secondly, I mean, if I can give a very different example, there are VCs that do not sign an NDA when they fund. Now, if you're sending your presentation to VC, how confident are you that the VC is not talking to 3 of your competitors, right? What if this VC invests in one of those competitors? So he actually has a business model and the entire pitch of the other 3 competitors, and he invests, right? So even if you can do something, you can build the idea, take it to, let's say, $1 million, and you're sitting happily on it. But what if somebody else comes in with more money and acquires the customers faster, builds a lot of new features, and the person will take over? So I think idea is one, execution, customer service, your ability to sustain and build the business are a lot of other factors which play a game when you build a startup.
Thank you.
So Sunil, not knowing how many slides you have, I'm going to ask one question. If these are
I left my home today. I said I'm going to be in office because this might be late. I'm happy sitting here.
Okay, Sunil, I have a question. Vijayanand here. Sunil, can I ask a question now?
Yeah, Vijay, please.
Okay, Vijay here. The many times I have seen the willpower of the team which starts the thing will not be sufficient, and also the self-motivation is very primary, because many a times we'll be hitting a lot of obstacles. So have you done that kind of psychological studies?
So Vijayanand, I think I'll answer that a little differently. So there are, let's say there are 100 people, they're wanting to do something, right? But how many people actually make that decision? So in my study or my understanding, I think if there's a difficult decision, let's say I'm talking about quitting a job, right? Now, assuming there are 100 people on this call, out of these 100 people, if I tell that there's a brilliant idea, right? Are you willing to quit your job? I'm certain not more than 1% of the people will be willing to do that tomorrow, right? That's exactly the same thing which happens, when you're saying whether people are having the willpower and all. I think there are people who have very strong willpower. They're willing to risk, and in fact, I'll be touching upon some of those areas in my own experience in my own life. But yes, willpower is extremely critical. But the willpower is basically your ability to take risk and make some tough decisions. Are you willing to let go your lifestyle? Are you willing to take a little pain? Are you willing to stretch? Because if you're still comfortable doing the 9 to 5 job, you're not fit for the startup. You have to, sleep with it day in, day out. And that's what most of us do when we're building a company. Of course I do sleep, but it doesn't mean that I'm actually sleeping. My mind is continuously working, and there are times when I wake up at 3 a.m. and I start writing things, that need to be done. So it's a little crazy for startup. I think you need to be fairly agile. You have to be accepting failures because the failures will make you understand what is not going right, and you can come better prepared next time when you're facing the client or coming up with a new product. So learn to adapt, learn to pivot, learn to change your mindset, and of course, as I said, be ready to accept failures. But don't think that's the end of it, because failure is only a learning. I mean, that's exactly what I'm talking about.
Yeah, thank you.
So effectively, failure is lack of success and abundance of learning. I mean, this is exactly what I said when I did my first startup, and I'll talk about that. Of course, I had to come out, but there's a huge learning, even with the first one. Even the second one, I think the learning is happening every day. So We move on. If there are no questions at the moment, I'll keep taking questions later on. Okay, I think this is easy to guess. What is common among these startups? They all are unicorns. How many of you have heard these startups? All of them.
What is the one in the bottom right?
That's Cult Fit.
Cult Fit.
Sorry, I'm not going to check. I think there's a lot of chat happening. Unfortunately won't be able to read that.
Cure Fit, right?
Yeah, Cult Fit, Cure Fit, right. So they all are unicorns: Flipkart, Zomato, Policybazaar, Udaan, which is B2B, InMobi, Paytm, and so on. Let me move forward. So I'll just pick. I didn't cover a lot of startups that have been successful because most of us keep listening about the success. We typically don't hear about the failure, and that's the reason I started with failure. And I spent time. I tried to dig deeper into the reasons for failure. I'm sure reason for success a lot of people can give, but I wanted to spend time on the failure. Swiggy, I think if you see, I think some of the people will have question, what is so different about this and the Pepper Tap that we read earlier. So I'll quickly switch back to that slide of Pepper Tap. Grew too fast without proper scale, high cash burn, high delivery cost, right? Offering discounts, buying at MRP, losing money on each transaction. Now let's look at what Swiggy did a bit differently, right? They actually built their own delivery fleet and efficiency, right? They had no minimum orders. So they had a business model which was in place. They used technology for faster delivery and live tracking, which improved the customer service issue which PepperTap had. They are maintaining cost and price and branding. It's primarily with the food packaging, how they've done the branding. Every packet that you get has a Swiggy sticker or a tape on it. They are actually ensuring customer satisfaction. They're fairly good with that. They have a very sustainable business model. I think one thing which they did differently was they started charging a delivery fee. Initially, they were giving free delivery or very small price they're charging. But over a period, they realized it is not a sustainable business. Having said that, I think even today, most of these companies are not profitable. So just hear to this very carefully. Swiggy, we call a successful company, but it is not profitable, right? Now, I'll switch back to this. How many of these companies you think are actually profitable?
Profitable or cash flow positive? You're saying profitable.
I'm asking profitable. Or let's go with cash flow positive also.
I think Byju's.
I think so. I think Byju's is probably one of them. I believe even Freshworks to a large extent is there.
Yeah.
Sorry, somebody was saying something.
Policybazaar to cash flow positive.
Yeah, so Policybazaar also is cash flow positive. They are in the market now, but they're trying to raise additional funding. Zomato is definitely trying to raise additional funding. This is more or less going to move to the previous slide, failure side, in my opinion, because they're struggling big time. Their food business had been extremely poor. Their health centers aren't functioning very efficiently, so they're actually struggling at the moment. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time here. This was just to give you an idea.
One of my observations, Sunil, on stuff like this is the concept of wanting profit and cash flow was something that we learned in business school, whereas what of the VCs and a lot of the investors don't seem to care about it as much today as they used to care about 15 years back.
So Anand, I think there are different objectives, and I would probably request other people in, Ken and maybe if Debashish or anyone else who's following startups to share their thought process. In my opinion, VCs don't look for profit. So, you need to understand that VCs aren't looking for your company to be successful or profitable. What they're looking for you to do is to burn the cash faster, increase your ARR. And by increased ARR and by burning the cash faster and having larger customer acquisition and branding, your valuation goes up. So today you have raised, let's say, $5 million at 50 million valuation. Tomorrow they would want you to raise $15 million at 100 million valuation. So effectively you've raised 20 million of 100 million. Day after they would want you to raise, let's say 100 million at a 500 million valuation. And when this 100 million happens, they would want to make an exit and they'll get 25 million out of it.
That's what I'm saying. That's the thought process has changed. I agree with you.
Yeah. And if you look at that, I think their revenues are very low. And I was mentioning this to somebody a while ago. I mean, how many of you know Hike Messenger? Anyone who's been using Hike Messenger?
I am using like 6 months back. Right now, I'm not using.
So, Sony,
is it still
what is
popular?
the revenue of Hike Messenger? Do you know that?
Not sure. I have not checked that.
How much funding Hike Manager has raised? Hike Messenger. So I think Hike Messenger has raised fairly large amount. I don't have the exact number, but easily 100 million or more. The revenue is, if I remember correctly, I think it's about less than 50 CR, probably about 10-15 CR, which is 2 million, 2 million, 3 million. I think they're probably somewhere in that range.
Yeah, it's actually the current Mittal, the owner, this one, Bharti Mittal's son who's running it, right?
Correct.
And the Wink Music is rather a successful venture than this one, right?
Yeah.
Hike
So
Messenger.
what I'm trying to do is, the success and the profitability are two different stories, and success in the business world and success in the startup world have different meanings altogether. So if you're running a business and you have a family business, and end of the day you're not taking some money back home, you probably will start crying 3 months down the line. But if you're running a startup, it doesn't matter whether your company is profitable or not. You will anyway be taking a lot of money back if you get funded. So
I want to caution against that line of thinking. I don't agree that profits don't matter or cash flow positive doesn't matter. The way I would put it is that flexibility of capital changes the timescales over which it matters. That's how I would put it. I don't want people to take away the message that no matter what you do, you're going to make a hell of a lot of money by raising money. That happens sometimes. We raised a ton of money over a business which was probably fraud. But more often than not, what investors are saying is that over the long term, this is a viable business, but I don't need to stick with the business for the long term if I can sell the asset to the public markets or other willing buyers, right? And if you work backwards from there, the public markets won't be willing to buy a company which is usually not be willing to buy a company which is flawed. So don't take away the message that anything goes. A lot of these companies have a long-term value.
So how did you word it, Satish? You worded it in a specific way. You said flexibility of capital with
the flexibility of so what has happened is that the venture model, what it has done is it has opened up this additional pathway for wealth which was otherwise on the sidelines to be deployed over a longer time frame. You're talking about people who have a very good rate of return, and they're looking for diversification, and they're willing to withstand 10-15 years of payback time, right? Yeah. So now if you shift the time scale over which you need payback, you get tremendous flexibility. If you look at what Reliance has done, right?
Patient capital.
Patient capital, strategic and patient capital. So it doesn't mean that Reliance is just throwing away money. They just have a bigger time horizon, and they can afford to have a bigger time horizon, and that's what startups are able to do as well with VC.
Yeah, I think, Satish, thank you for adding that. Just let me just correct. So if I ever said that, startups are only trying to play the valuation game, that's not right. What I meant is I think a lot of startups at smaller scales and at various scales are doing it. But the business, mindset continues to remain the same, that in the longer run, you have to make profits. If you are unable to become profitable over a period of time, I'm certain nobody would want to invest. What you talked about VC and the asset, yes, VCs typically have 5 years to 10-year time frame when they want an exit. But most of these VCs understand that their exit will not be based on the profitability. Their exit will be based on the next round of investment which happens in the firm. So that's how they look at it. Of course, the firm will start generating some cash flow and some profits in 3 to 5 years period, but it will not be enough for them to increase the valuation. So they play more of a ARR and gross profit base.
Actually, Sunil, just to build on that, and maybe please put us in check if you think it is a little out of the way, but I think it's extremely important. The point that Satish is making, building on what you are saying, it is extremely important to find the right kind of investor, right?
True.
And I mean, given your objective and the market and the kind of capability that you would want to build, finding that right capital with the right outlook will become extremely important. I think you focusing on additional investment and the investor focusing on profitability could lead to adverse outcome in the near term, right? And similar other permutation combinations.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. I mean, I'll give you a couple of examples. I mean, if I talk about my own firm, we're looking for fundraising now, and we have been talking to VCs. And whenever we go, we are trying to build a mix of product as well as service. They are willing to invest only in product, not on services, because they're looking for faster valuation jump, which we wouldn't be able to give them. But what we are promising them is we'll give you sustainable growth and a larger exit at a later point in time. It may not be next 2 years, 3 years, which they are hesitant with. I can talk about another company, where, okay, sorry, I wouldn't mention the name of the company. They're struggling because they had a few investors that came in early. They put in about a couple of $1 million. After 3 years, now they're saying, I need an exit. Now, this is how a lot of early investors they think they want an exit in 2 to 3 years or 5 years time frame, wherein VCs tend to look for a 5 to 10 year time frame. So this is where the big gap is in the level of investments that I have. Another point that Satish briefly talked about was assets. If you build assets, you will be able to demand higher valuation, or the market will give you something, the higher valuation during IPO, etc. But keep in mind, I think a lot of these companies that we're talking about, having large funding coming in, to be honest, I think none of them probably have that big an asset to talk about. For example, Zomato, I mean, what is an asset for Zomato? If I talk about a manufacturing firm, I can still talk about the assets. But for Zomato, it's more of intangibles and the brand that we are talking about, not necessarily so much of the assets. Because the delivery guys, I mean, if you are aware of the numbers, the attrition is 60% to 100%. So you can't say your employees are your asset because they don't really bring the skills, the knowledge. They are working at a different. They actually bring more of our deliveries, capability, not necessarily knowledge or anything which you can value at a higher. Yeah, we move ahead. Okay, I tried to give an idea of what could potentially help make building a successful startup. As you can see, idea and the product and service. You may have an idea, but if you don't know how to build a product out of it or service out of it, and how to deliver, I don't think it's of any value. If you have an idea, you have not done enough market research, You don't know whether it could be a potential client or not. I think, again, the idea is of no value. If you do not have the resources to build that idea and carry it forward to the market and sustain the business for a period while you're still tapping into the customer mind and winning them, I think it again has no value. So your idea, your product and service, the quality of product, service, feature, competition, a lot of these things play a big mark, big thing. Idea, product, service, market, as you can see, all of this has to come together. You have to have a team. You may have an idea, you may have a product service, you may have a market that you think you can do, but if you do not have a team to execute. Now, team is people, and people means also budget, cost, efficiency, execution, and all of this that comes in. So I'm not going to be spending a lot of time on this, but just to give you an idea, I think there are multiple things that come in together to build a successful startup. Again, idea, product, market, team, resources, funds, and execution. So Anand, to go back to the question that you had earlier, I mean, if you have an idea, you fear that somebody else will know that, so you don't want to be talking about it. I think there are a lot of other things that have to come together to build the company. So an idea probably would not be enough. And I think most of us have heard that, probably everyone has an idea. Yeah. Okay, I would just go to basics of what's a startup. We did talk about startups, failure, or success, but what exactly is a startup? Any thoughts? What is a startup?
Midlife crisis. Just kidding.
Okay. Okay, so I think, keep in mind, startup definition is very clear. Are you solving a problem? Is there a problem? Is there demand in the market? Or is there a big opportunity that you are creating, right? If you're targeting that, only then, you're part of the startup cycle. Similarly, is that scalable? So you may be solving a problem, but at what scale you're solving a problem? And if you're, of course, grocery delivery is an issue. But then you also have those next door grocery stores that are doing a home delivery. So is that a startup? Right? It's not a startup because it's actually trying to solve a problem for the 100 people living in that society. So it's not scalable. He's not thinking big. He's just one of the pawn in the larger game of startups. Evolving business model. I think this is something which can also help add. Of course, when you start a company, you would have an idea, but are you willing to continuously evolve your business model, your idea? Can you innovate? Can you continue to innovate? Because if you're not innovating, if you're not really pivoting when there is a need, if you're not, listening to the customer, changing your business model, changing your product, changing the features, offerings, services, I think you'll be out of the business very soon. So make sure you have a very clear problem statement or an opportunity that you're trying to serve. Your opportunity size has to be there. And again, I think there are multiple ways of looking at the opportunity size. Somebody would say this is a 2 billion opportunity, but that 2 billion opportunity is throughout the world. What is it opportunity, let's say within India? Now within India, if I'm sitting here in Gurgaon, Delhi, I can potentially service Delhi NCR to start with for the next 2 years. So is that scalable enough? Is it big enough for me to venture in? Or that will only give me, let's say, 20 lakhs a year. So then it's definitely not worth spending time. And then can I continue to evolve my business? I think that's very important. So anyone else who wants to add something to the startup definition, or what do you think is a startup or what do you think is not a startup? Okay. Try doing some startup life cycle just to give an idea to what a startup life cycle should be. First of all, you need to figure out what the problem is. You need to think what is the potential solution and to the problem that you're thinking of. You need to do the initial customer identification, and I think all of this tags back to the market research, competitive research, customer segmentation, and all of these areas. You need to do some kind of thinking around it before you go next. That's exactly coming to the next. So some of this is kind of overlapping problem. You do the market research, figure out that there is a valid problem. You do a validation of it, you do a sizing of it. You figure out, can you differentiate if there are already people who are offering the same service? How would you differentiate? Just imagine, I'm probably picking up the wrong example here, but one of the bigger ones, which most of you would be aware, Tesla. So I think there were already cars in the market. What was the need for Tesla to come in and do something different? So try to think, what is it that you're bringing to the market? What is the differentiator? What is unique? Why would people want to buy from you? So Tesla is not only trying to address one of the problem, which is the gas, petrol, and the consumption by bringing the electric vehicles. So it's actually also helping the environment. Second, I think it's aspirational value, right? Because if you have a Tesla, forget everyone else, you yourself will be probably keeping your collars up, thinking I have a Tesla. So I think it's a very different mindset. You need to find what is differentiator, what customers you're targeting, what is the competition, how would you tackle all of it? And once you have done
Sunil, sorry, question there. This is Vash here. Just one on the previous slide. You said the definition there has individuals. Sorry, I had to make you go back a little bit. Is there a particular focus on retail, or is it when you say a large number of individuals, or is it for B2B or even government kind of sectors? I mean, is startup the focus? Is it only about individuals or?
So valid point. I think it's a very, very valid point. I think this definition probably is more towards B2C, but of course it can be B2B as well. So as long as you have the large market, which is scalable, so don't look at the individuals. What you need to look at is, are you solving a problem? Is that business scalable?
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Okay.
And is it as evolving business model? If it's a B2B, of course, again, these three things will still stand.
Gotcha. All right. Fair enough.
So moving on, once you have done the problem identification, some problem solution fit, you've thought through what your idea is, you've done the market research, understood how would you position your product or the service. You need to, do a MVP, which is a minimum viable product. There are a lot of people who end up spending months working on a product. I mean, I have had experience with a couple of startups where I invested. I did the seed round for them, and they took almost 18 months to build a fairly, I wouldn't call it simple, but a product which they could have actually developed in 3 months. And one of the reasons being, the guys never went out seeking the right expertise to build that product. They were trying to learn that technology to build the product on their own. Now, that's not how it should be. You have to move fast, build an MVP, go to the market, get the customer feedback, and then try to improvise on it. So proof of concept is extremely critical, which again links to the validation. So once you've done the MVP and you've done the POC and early adopters, you will eventually understand whether there's a problem validation or not, whether your product is acceptable in the market or not. Product market fit, which happens here. There's a market validation which is done. You keep doing this. I mean, if there's a negative feedback coming in during your market research, you go back, you figure out what went wrong, you improvise on your product, come back with newer features, add them here, bring it, and then this cycle continues. And this is a continuous customer feedback, product journey plus innovation that has to be there. While you're doing it, I think you need to think of the larger business problem. What is your business model? You may have an idea. If you do not know how to make money out of it, or how to sell it, how to acquire a customer, how to keep the competition out, I think you will anyway not be moving forward beyond this line. So you have to have the business model. You need to have a go-to-market strategy. Now, this again, I think a lot of people don't really understand what is a business model. They think it's fairly straightforward, but to be honest, it requires a lot of groundwork. You need to think from multiple angles. I mean, I'm sure many of you are running business. You would understand the initial cost of setting up a business plus the operating cost. Both of these have to be kept in mind, and then how would you generate money? Making sure that you make enough money to not only keep some to run your home, but also to reinvest back in the business. If you're not reinvesting back in the business, you will not be able to do what we're trying to do here. So you need to keep investing in your business at least for the next first 2-3 years, or rather forever. And that's extremely critical. It should be all coming from your business model, which should tell you how would you sustain for next many years, and how would you continue to generate enough cash to sustain the business. Go to market again is very critical. I think don't just think that, okay, many of people nowadays, they think that I can have a business and I would do it on Facebook, or I would do it on a digital marketing. I have, good connects. I have friends and family, and I'll work through them, and I'll be able to build a business. Sure, you can very well do that. Not saying it can't be done. You can certainly reach a level where you can make enough money to, cover your expenses. But are you talking about startup here? If you're talking about a startup, you have to have a very clear strategy. How would you go to the market? Which all customers you'll be targeting? Why would those customers be buying from you? For example, we are currently advising one of the FMCG firms. They were earlier doing, so their earlier positioning was more of a healthcare firm selling some medicaments and rather medical supplements. And we looked at their product portfolio. They had almost 3,000 plus SKUs. We brought those SKUs down to roughly 340 SKUs. We let go a lot of their products that they were very passionate about because those didn't fit into the larger strategy. We changed their positioning from a healthcare to a FMCG based on their product and the consumers that they were targeting, and the age group, etc. And then we said, okay, how would you go about your sales? So the sales is, of course, a mix of online and offline. Of course, in today's world, offline is a little restricted, so you can't keep opening stores. So you have to rely a lot on online. So the go-to-market strategy is very critical. Again, it's not as simple as setting up a store somewhere and selling it. You need to, find a way to reach out to your consumer, bring them to you, whether to your store or to your website or to your Amazon store or wherever, and convert them. So it's just not bringing, also converting them to buy your product. So it's a fairly detailed exercise. Planning and resourcing, I'm sure most of you would have done it. I'm not going to spend time on it. Evaluation, I think you need to have regular checks. If you're running a startup, you need to have certain milestones. And milestones are for each and every phase. For example, when you would be out with your first MVP, when would you go with the second MVP? When would you add the next level of products or features into it? When would you go to the next city? When would you open to the new set of consumers? When would you make that entire business model from a freemium model to a fully subscription model, and so on? So you have to have clear milestones, and you need to keep checking yourself on these milestones to make sure you're learning, you're evaluating yourself. It could also be a milestone for many of us where we should be checking whether we have enough cash to carry on, because we may run out the cash or the passion to build it. So you have to have a milestone here saying, okay, I'll test it out for 3 years. And if I don't think it's going to be successful, maybe I'll take a call 3 years down the line. So some of those milestones have to be here, some business, some personal milestones. You need to have an execution strategy. You have to have the right product development team, sales and marketing strategy, sourcing and delivery. For example, if you're building an aggregator model, you need to figure out how would you do the aggregation, which is more of a sourcing of your services, and then who would you deliver? So this whole thing has to be taken care of. Growth, again, you may keep doing it, and you will be so exhausted while you're doing all of it, back and forth, months on months. Sometimes looking at your bank account, thinking I'm pretty much out of cash. You get a new deal, you get some cash, so you'll be so exhausted you wouldn't think of growth. There are also times when you start building MVP and you end up building features that are not required, and you build 60% of the features which are not required, and you're so exhausted you can't grow, right? So you need to think, what is this thing that is helping you scale? If something that you have built here or during this entire planning and strategy process, you think it's not helping you grow, you figure a way out to pivot, right? It's so critical for you to understand what is selling, what is not selling, and what is selling, how can you take it to the next scale? And in line to this, you also need to look at the funding and acquisition. To be honest, fundraising or the funding is an ongoing process. It starts right at the ideation stage. There are companies that actually get funding at ideation. There are people who are going for funding when they have an MVP. This is the best time when you should go for the initial seed funding. During this phase, strong recommendation to keep it bootstrapped or friends and family or a smaller group of angel network. This is where you can potentially go for a little more strategic fundraising. Uh, this is where you actually should be going with institutional investor for formal fundraising, and then of course the growth phase starts right here as you plan, strategize, evaluate, execute, and build the business. This entire section is where you will continue to look for larger funding. So effectively fundraising goes throughout the life cycle of the startup. uh, I would be covering a bit of the fundraising later. But keep in mind, I think your fundraising can easily take 6 to 9 months. Don't imagine that you have an idea and somebody will put money in. Don't think that you have an MVP and people will be excited and they'll say, okay, here's $1 million. No, it never happens. There are 100 people in the queue that are looking for this money. We saw the VC number, 2 of the 1,000 startups that get funding. If you go with a lower number, I mean, if you go to the seeds and Series A and other rounds, it could be a little higher, but it's not as easy as we were thinking. I'll pause for a couple of seconds. If any questions on this slide or so far, happy to take those.
Hey Sunil, a quick question.
Yeah,
so typically, where do you see the most of the people failing in this life cycle? At what stage? Are there key phases or stages here where people should be more careful?
So I think, I would think a lot of the people don't even venture out. Okay. This is one of the areas where people are so much passionate that I have an idea, I want to do this, but do they have, the passion, the energy, the resources, the guts to do it? That's where I think 99% of the people, they never venture out. So out of the 1% which is coming and building this startup ecosystem, there's a significant failure that happens at this stage. Everyone can build a business, they can run for 6 months, 9 months, 12 months, or a year or two. But 2 years or 3 years down the line, I think I don't have the exact number with me right now, but about 40 to 45% of the startups fail within the first 2 years or 2.5 years of starting up. And this is where the stage is, because they can't think big. They are not thinking strategically and enough about how to tap into the right market, how to acquire the customer, how to make it a profitable business for themselves, and how to scale it. Because if you can't scale, if you can't make a profitable business, you can't, run it for long. Just imagine, I think if any of us are thinking of venturing into the startup on our own, as of today at this stage, we have a very significant opportunity cost. I'm sure, most of us wouldn't want to do that today because we are earning, so much that if we have to build a startup, it will easily take us, 3, 4, 5 years before we start drawing that kind of salary again. Forget, forget applying the 10, 15, 20%, year-on-year growth that we had. What is your current market salary today? Even to get to this level, you need to spend next 3 to 5 years to build a startup and before you start drawing. So never venture into a startup thinking that you would want to, earn salary. I think it's a long-term game. It's passion plus the long-term wealth that you're thinking. Most people never think that way, and I think this is where most of
them. Hey, Sunil, I have a question on building the initial team. You mentioned that you should find out complementary skills or areas of expertise. Do you go to that level, or do you also go to the level where you try to filter out who the right players are, who will work with you better? What other things are very important for the initial team?
So very good question, Pradeep. I think to be honest, it's a very difficult answer to give. Who's the right partner for you? building a startup is as good as, marrying somebody. And the only good side is, and I think which probably is applying to the other side too, that in a startup you can probably call it off very quickly, but in marriage you probably will have to drag it for a few years. You can come out of it. So the fact is, you have to spend time finding the right partner. Having said that, I think the good side is, and I'm certain most of you probably would be following, a lot of the startups are started by people who went to the college together, right? Or the people who worked in certain organizations together, or folks who know one another. It's very unlikely that two totally unknown people will come together, think of an idea and build it. That will happen only in rare cases, but typically people would know one another for a period of time before they venture in. Now, second, I think, though I talked about the complementary skills, having said that, I think if you have the people who are as passionate and as transparent and committed as you are, I think that's the right team, because you can always hire the people to deliver. If you're trying to build a startup, a lot of that is, of course, skills, but a lot more of it is about passion and strategy and thinking what to build, how to scale it up. For example, I keep telling this to a lot of people that I probably I'm not qualified to do technology work today, or probably have not done it in the last 18, 20 years. Having spent 20 years in IT, I probably have not coded for more than 2 years in IT. So you don't necessarily need to know the skill, but you should be, qualified or smart enough to hire the right talent to get the work done. Now, if you have to get that done, you have to have the people who you can trust. You have to have the resources to hire the qualified, resources. Now, when it comes to team, the most important thing is, are you guys gelling well? Can you trust? Because one of the biggest problem that happens in the startup is a trust deficit. It causes a lot of burn because one person is thinking of building a very scalable model. They're thinking of going after the client in certain way. The other person is thinking very differently. They start playing politics within the organization. There are fights over the money which has been withdrawn by the founders. There are fights over the SHAs, the shareholder agreement. Most of the founders, they do not do shareholder agreements because they're friends or family. 3, 6, 8 months down the line, when you're going for the fundraising or when your business starts scaling up, you sit across the table and evaluate who is bringing what to the table. And I think then it gets quite messy. So you need to spend time with the person you're bringing on board. The best is if you know the person over a period of time, you know the person's personality more than the skill. Because personality plays a big role when you're building a team. The attitude, aptitude, and all that, which I'll probably be touching later in my own firm, that is extremely critical. Or you take an ownership and say, I'm the owner, you will come in as a co-founder, and I'll dictate the terms. If the person leaves, you should be in a position to hire the next co-founder or a team.
Thank you. So I think the top three things that you should be looking for is the passion and trust and the attitude, right?
Yeah, I think attitude, aptitude, and I would think to a large extent the trust. These are so critical, because if you have the right attitude, you will work together, ensuring. I mean, trust me, in a startup there are a lot of burns that happen. You will have a lot of ups and downs, but can you work cohesively as a team, sit together, discuss the problems, find a solution, and for finding a solution, you also need that aptitude. Find the solution and then take it forward. And that can happen only when you're actually understanding one another. Also have the vision how to build your business. That's how you'll define your team.
Great.
This is very interesting, thing. Just keep in mind, before I open everything else, just read the opening line of this slide, and interestingly, Ken picked it up. So I found it somewhere, and I found it very interesting. It says, starve the distractions and feed the focus. Now, just imagine what people do. I'm actually going to open up everything here. Now, where all you think people typically spend time when they're building a business, right? Now, a lot of people end up, doing that admin work. I'm actually going to get an office, I'll set it up, I'll get furniture and this and that, and they end up burning a lot of, valuable time into this. They get so worried about operations, they get so worried about, getting the best tools on day one. You have a 3-people team, you're trying to get an HR, solution implemented, you're trying to get an accounts, you want a Zoho for your accounting and so on and so forth. You want to do everything in-house, or you being a founder, I think you're just trying to be building everything on your own because you don't want to be spending money and outsourcing some of these things. You want to do all of it all at once. Of course, on one hand, this does make a lot of sense because you're short of cash. But if you keep thinking that way, you will never be able to move to the inner circle, which is the sales, finance, marketing, growth. So accounts is one where you keep the books. This is where you manage the cash, right? So how would you ensure that you have enough cash to build the business? How would you sell, right? How would you grow the business and how would you market your product or service? Unless you focus on this, you will not be able to get to this. And this is the most critical thing, what is your product or service? If you have not defined this the right way, if you have not built enough features into your product and service, you will not be able to find the clients. If you do not have the clients, this has no value. If you do not have the right product, you will not have the clients. Very simple. So if either of these two are missing, you will never be having the sales or the marketing. You will not be able to generate cash and there will be no growth. And if you have none of it, this outer circle is of no value, right? I think I'm just trying to emphasize again, focus on your clients, focus on what you're offering. If you have the right product and service, I'm certain there'll be people who are looking for it. And if people are looking for it, they will pay you money for you to, get higher sales and marketing. So this is such a critical thing. And I think most of the people don't really do it. One of the things that we do as part of the startup advisory, and especially when I'm advising CEOs and the leadership team, I look at where they're spending time. And to be honest, I think, which is very, very disappointing, that most of these people not spend time here. And I think, in my opinion, a CEO's job is not a single focus. But if I have to give CEO a single focus, I'll say focus on these two things as the most important: the client and sales. Because when you know who you're selling and how you're selling, you would know what potentially is selling. You will get the feedback from the client, right? Whatever you're building, eventually, this is where the voice is. You will get to understand this. So focus on these two, and you'll get to understand what is happening with the product or service. You keep improving this. Make somebody to lead this entire function for you, but focus on these two things. Primarily on client. Find clients, develop relationships, grow the client, make them repeat clients or whatnot. But I think this is one of the most critical things. During initial phase, of course, as a team, you can't always rely on outsiders or one single individual. If you have a 3, 4, 5 people team, you probably have to do all of it. But these two are so critical, for any business. Any comments on this? Okay. Moving quickly on to other areas, I'm just gonna do a time check of already 10:22. So I'll go a little faster on some of these because I think the subsequent section will take another at least 45 minutes or so. So funding options and instruments, I've just listed these here. I'm willing to talk about these maybe separately, but if I just spend a few seconds here, self-funding, bootstrapping is very common. I think this is where everyone starts building a business. If you're not putting your money in the game, if you're not putting your time in it, basically you're not really doing anything. So first question I ask is, do you have your skin in the game? And skin in the game is, are you committed? Are you serious? Are you putting your money, time, and energy into it? Friends and family are the first people that we reach out to when we need funding. Crowdfunding is a new thing which has started lately. It is successful to some extent, But if you're building a business, I don't recommend you to go for crowdfunding. Incubators, accelerators, though they talk a lot about helping startups, supporting them, but I've studied a lot of them. I've worked with a few over the last couple of years. They all lack the expertise to give the right advice to the startups. Most of them do not have enough funds to give you the right seed capital. They tend to give you 5 lakhs, 10 lakhs of grant, which is not enough. Thirdly, most of them think that giving a seat is what the startup is looking for. So they tend to give you a seat, a desk, and many of them start charging for the desk as well. So I think not the best place to be. Angel investors networks, yes, it works as long as you're trying to build, raise smaller capital. You can go to angel investors. If you're going with a little larger capital, micro VCs and seed funds come in. They typically are willing to spend anything from 50 lakhs to, let's say, $500,000 or sometimes $1 million. If you go more than that, then the VCs, Ps, family offices, and most of this is typically, so if I look at friends and family or some of it, this is debt to some extent, debt plus equity, but most of this will typically be equity. When you go to the debt side of it, so loans, credit card, debt, all this is very common. There are some grants by the government for small businesses. You can check. If you're building a non-for-profit organization or something which is having a social impact, you can check on the CSR funds. There can also be some funds raised through partnering, developing strategic partnerships or giving licenses to your district. So we'll not spend a lot of time here, but if anyone has any quick question, I can talk about it.
Hey, Sunil, I have a question. Actually, at what stage of the life cycle do you start looking out for funds, man?
As I said, Sachin, I think it's throughout the life cycle. You see right here, the moment you have an idea, some people will start looking for funding. My personal advice is don't do that at this stage. You should actually start looking for funding when you have an MVP in place. If your MVP requires, let's say, a few crores to spend, maybe $300,000, $400,000, I think, of course, you can't really spend that much. A lot of people wouldn't want to do it. But if it requires a smaller sum, if I think $100,000, $150,000, $200,000, maybe give it a try. You have to have that much of money in place to build your MVP, build your business for a foreseeable future, and then start raising funding. Because only then you will be able to generate the right valuation for your firm.
Thank you.
There are multiple instruments. Again, I'm not going to be going too much in depth on all of it. I can take questions separately, outside this. But equity, debt, convertible notes, CCPs, CCPS, there are various ways you can raise funding. Equity and debt are fairly straightforward. These are, I would say a mix of equity and debt at times. So CN, it gives the investors some opportunity to give out debt, which can be converted into equity within certain time frame. Some of the benefits of some of these other options are you don't have to fix the valuation upfront. Many times, you and I, when we are investing, we wouldn't know how much is the valuation of the firm. So you go with a deferred valuation and you can work out a discount on the valuation whenever the formal valuation happens in the later round. So those things can be done, but as I said, if you are looking for more details, I can do a separate call and go deeper into this. Okay, wanted to quickly spend a few minutes talking about the hot sectors. Again, wouldn't cover in depth, but fintech is hot. Money is always in demand. How to manage money is extremely critical. How to make money efficient is so important. Those are the things which are being addressed by cashless payments. As you see, many of us would be using digital wallets, POS, internet banking, and all this is all part of the cashless payments. So money management and efficiency of transaction is what people are trying to address here. Unsecured lending is again picking up. This is more of a P2P lending or even SME lending, which is picking up. Very high risk. A lot of startups have come into these sectors. There's a lot of innovation happening within the fintech space. EdTech has picked up significantly over the last few months. Of course, this had already been quite hot with the names you must have heard of, Udemy or Byju's or Coursera, Simply Learns and all. But I think this is even getting a lot more attention, mainly because more and more people are looking for online learning, and that's where the EdTech comes in. Now this is also being sold as an aspirational solution. For example, Byju's, some of you probably would be using for your kids. So I wouldn't have an opinion on Byju. I have not used it, but I think whatever I read, Byju's is a mix of both. It does offer some value, but somewhere it is also threatening the parents to buy it because somebody else has already bought it. So this is how the EdTech sectors is coming in. If you look at people of our generation or others, we're continuously going back to the online channels for improving our skills. This is so critical in today's world to upgrade our own skills. School management systems are picking up, end-to-end school management systems where they are tracking right from, earlier we used to have just the, I would say, attendance getting captured, but there are solutions which have been covering a lot of different areas. In fact, Jasmeet, I would probably request him to talk later in the session. He can talk about Test Outlook, what they have built. A brilliant solution, I think, targeting kids as well as K-12, schools. So brilliant stuff. Health tech is also picking up. I believe there was a lot of discussion post Devashi's session last couple of weeks ago. Telemedicine is quite hot. Genetic disorders and lifestyle diseases are picking up. Earlier, people were not paying attention to this, but there is more and more focus on these areas. Patient record management is also getting very hot. In fact, some of the latest technologies, blockchain, etc., are being used for patient record management. Just imagine today you are visiting one of the doctors in a certain hospital, and they give you some prescription. They do make you do some tests, and then you go back home. You keep the prescription somewhere, and then you also keep those test reports somewhere. And then next time when you're again falling sick, you don't know what happened to me last time, and where are the test results, and what medicines I took last time, and so on and so forth. So the patient record management is extremely critical. Just imagine if that hospital has uploaded all of that information onto a solution, technology solution, which has authentication, authorization, control with you, where you can tell who can have access to it. And when you visit the next hospital, you give them a temporary access. They can see your entire history. And I think you will get probably a much better attention and medication prescription there. Logistics is again picking up, a very hot sector. I think logistics is one of the biggest sectors, across the world. And there's a lot of innovation happening. Of course, there are many reasons for innovation because this is highly inefficient sector. Most of the truckers or the transporters, they have 3, 4, 5 trucks that they operate with. There are a lot of people who are having just one single truck. So there's a huge opportunity for aggregation and bringing efficiency. There are also innovation happening. Some of the startups have actually introduced, relay among the drivers. So, a driver doesn't have to drive from, let's say, Chennai all the way to Delhi. The driver can drive for 6, 8 hours, and then there's another driver on the way who takes over and he drives for next 8 hours and so on. So there's no downtime for the truck. Your efficiency, goes significantly high because of the driver who's driving alone will have to take a break, take a sleep. Maybe he will take 2.5 days to reach from Chennai to Delhi. But if there's another driver who's coming in, you probably can cover that same distance in 24 hours. So route optimization, and this is also not just for the that, but also for the delivery. If you look at Swiggy and all, they're doing a lot of route optimization because by doing the route optimization, again, you can find the shortest route for delivery because there are penalties. They're giving discounts if they delay the penalty by, if they delay the delivery by a few minutes, they have a 25 minutes or 35 minutes estimate. So they're trying to, continuously improve on these areas. Real-time tracking, which has come in, you are also using, the GPS devices to track where the truck is or your, delivery partner is. There were times when you make a call for one of your shipping item, you would be told that it will probably be delivered tomorrow, but the thing is actually not even started from the origin. So there is a lot of a lot of improvement. Enterprise SaaS is picking up inventory management, accounting, legal, compliance. So you must have seen a lot of Zoho, Freshworks, and so on picking up in India. Even the legal side, there's a lot of innovation happening. In fact, I met a startup last week. They have done a fairly good legal and compliance management. So you don't necessarily need to have your own system. It does the alerting, the monitoring, the maintenance of all your legal and compliance issues. So one-stop shop for brilliant stuff. Moving to e-commerce and consumer services, I think this is continuously evolving, especially with Corona, where consumers aren't able to visit a store. I think there's a significant jump in the D2C consumption where brands are saying, why should I always be selling via Amazon or such things? If I take it away from e-commerce and just talk about, for example, what's happening with Apple or Google. So they were kind of, the larger, I wouldn't say e-commerce, but they were the larger players that were controlling the, the app stores. And now there are a lot of other people coming in and saying, we'll build our own app store or we'll allow, our customers to directly download from our own website. So similarly, the e-commerce is evolving where companies are saying, why should I pay 30% to Amazon, and on top of it, they also charge the delivery from me. They don't let me define my own pricing or the discounts, and they can always play with the ranking of my products compared to my competition. So I'm always depending on them. They may bring in their own, branded product. They would underplay my product. So there's a lot of issues with the large e-commerce aggregators, and more companies are awakening to the D2C approach to reach out to consumers. Sorry, I think I did some copy paste error here. I see accounting and legal compliance. My apologies. EVs are picking up. Fairly hot sector. One of our clients is in the EV space. They're in the B2B space. I know there is a lot of other innovation happening in EV, especially around battery, because battery, I think, is one of the biggest problems. Unless that's solved or there is an infrastructure which is built for recharging, you will not see this achieving the right level of success. We did a consulting for one of the companies where we helped them define a roadmap for setting up 100 charging stations pan-India. Now, those kind of things are there, but I think then the capital investment is quite high. Each of these EV chargers are relatively expensive, from 7 lakhs to 15 lakhs and higher. And then you also require space, you require manpower, you need to do a lot of automation and so on. So I think it's still a long game, but there's a very high traction both in cars, but two-wheelers are picking up very nicely on the EV side. And there are more and more companies that are getting into the two-wheeler rental space. OTT media and online gaming is also quite hot, especially with the COVID. A lot of people are sitting at home and they're starting to, spend more and more time on their phones or laptops. Especially in India or even other countries, I think the data cost is going down drastically over the last few years. And that has enabled people to spend more and more time online watching. Agri-tech is very hot right now. In fact, this is also getting a lot of government support. More and more startups are spending time building agri-tech. However, most of them are actually focusing on two large segments. One is they're trying to address the logistics issue. How to bring the produce from the farm to the retail store or to the consumer. So that logistics, the supply chain, they're trying to manage. The other area which is getting a lot of focus is organic, but organic is, I think, it's not as big, I would say, solution as a hype. I think people are still trying to manipulate with what is organic and what is not. So that's something which is still evolving. Space tech, another big sector. I'm sure Hashish, Guptadar, and others can speak, and some of you guys follow it. I don't necessarily spend a lot of time on space tech and robotics, so I can't speak a lot on it, but I do follow some of the investments which are happening in these sectors, and that's quite impressive. Robotics definitely is picking up. More of the machines are being used because robotics, IoT, and some of it can also be used for solving some of your other problems like logistics, delivery, or some of that. So I'll pause for a couple of seconds again. If any questions, I'm happy to.
Sunil, Rashikar here.
Yeah, Raj.
Hey, Sunil, the question is slightly on a different thing. It's more about the equity part and how people need to evaluate themselves. I mean, like this has been a big, what do you call, sort of a bane for, sort of a contest between different people I've seen. So how do we, take it like how the equity should be allocated in the initial stage when a company is formed or something like that, and when somebody has to be added as a add-on director or something, then how, what precautions they need to take in terms of evaluation and then giving things. And also maybe in the same vein, can you say something about the vesting period and stuff, and how these things are to be taken care?
Okay, it's a little different question than what we're talking, but I'll just spend few minutes here for all of your benefits. I actually did a consulting engagement with one of the starters where they were running this business for 2 years and they ran into a big fight. The co-founders ran into a big fight, and the reason being, things were not working out, and they were saying, whose mistake was that? And they both wanted to keep the company, and they both wanted to move out of the company. That was a very difficult thing to do. So the reason being, I think they both wanted to keep the company by giving other person a very small fraction for the equity the other person was holding, a very small amount, and they wanted full control, or they wanted to let go, but by asking a lot of money. So very complex problem to solve. As I said earlier, most of the co-founders, when they come in, they don't talk about shareholding agreement. Especially if they are friends, and they never talk about it. Or even otherwise, I'll talk about it later in my own experience. We never had a shareholder agreement when we came in because it was all based on trust. Now, trust is great, but I think there have to be a lot of other things that come in. So when you talk about the equity split, there are mathematical ways of doing equity split. So I can share some templates with you. Those are like Excel spreadsheets. You can play with it. A very simpler approach could be, let's assume two of you are coming with similar background, similar skill set, similar capability. You are willing to put the same amount of money and willing to commit the same amount of time. And for next 3 years, maybe you can split half and half. Very simple math there. But if two of you are going to play different roles in the farm, and one role is a lot more valuable than the other, or one has better customer connects and is able to get the right level of revenue, the other person is bringing in technology, and unless the two of you come together, again there'll be a problem. Maybe split again. But if one person has a little edge over the other, then be a little logical and realistic. There's no harm having different equity stakes, because the person who's bringing greater value and is having a lot more, I would say, I can't define passion, but a lot more commitment, giving more time, or is taking a lot more financial risk. So if two of you, one person is, let's say, at a 1 CR salary, the other person is at 1.5 CR salary, and both of you are letting go, maybe you define your opportunity cost, put that in the spreadsheet and say, oh, we both are putting in this much time, and we are also putting in 2 CR each as cash. So how much is the total money that we are letting go? So 2 CR as a cash. Then what is for next 3 years? One person is 1.5, for 3 years is 4.5, and 2 is 6.5. For the other person, for 3 years, it is 3 plus 2 is 5. So that's where the difference is, 5 and 6.5. you can apply some math there and say, okay, we'll split the equity in this way. If you can pick up a couple of more, I would say, pointers or parameters there, you can be a little more specific about how this equity can be split. But in simple words, try not to be sticking to 50-50. That is not always a good practice. Understand who's bringing what to the table and who's letting to go what. I mean, I'll talk about that in one of my starters, which happened. In fact, in my current company itself, similar issue happened. I wouldn't call it issue. A similar experience happened, wherein when I started Imbibe, two of my co-founders, they wanted to come in, and one of them wanted to continue with with his or her job for next 1 year, while the other two continue to build. The second person wanted to come in, but he did not want to put money. So you see the gap there, that one person's continuously in the job, second person coming in but not putting money, third person coming in, giving time and also putting money and risking everything. So I think if we all had to split equally, it wouldn't be very logical. So I think this probably will give you an answer, Raj. You have to be very specific what each individual is bringing to define the equity split. Mathematical ways of doing it, but there is a realistic approach to doing it.
Okay, so yeah, I got it. But my main concern in most of the startups is people in the initial yield, they commit a lot, but they don't perform or they don't give right time. So then the issue comes. So that's where I was just looking at.
So that moves to your second
this
thing.
Yeah.
That moves to your second point. I think you have to have a cliff for both founders, and even with the cliff, you have to have some kind of a vesting period. So if the founder, one founder is leaving, so that's where the shareholder agreement or the founders agreement is extremely critical, and I can talk about it separately with you if you need help anyway. But you need to make sure that if, let's say, one person leaves after the first year and that person has taken 30% of the equity, and there are two other people, one takes 40, another one 30, then the one who's stepping out, you make sure that person gets all 30% only when this person spent, let's say, 3 years or 4 years or 5 years. And it's not just true for that individual, it is actually true for all the co-founders, that you all will be eligible for your full equity only when you spend that much of time in the company. If you do not spend that much of time, then whatever you have not earned, till that vesting period, that comes back to the company. Those shares get allocated back to the company. Rather, those don't get allocated to you. So we will have to find the right approach, I think. But the fact is, you can't own all the shares on day one. You will be given a notional allocation of those shares. But if you're not spending time or money or your performance is not good, you should be willing to let go. And that goes back into the company. Now, keep in mind, I think I'm diverging a little, but the share, the way people look at equity percentage, it works in a very different way. You cannot always have 33 kind of a thing. If the shares are going back to the company, the person who's still there, his percentage equity will go up. He will not get those shares, right? So if there are, let's say, 100 shares in the company and 100 are paid up, and as I said, the earlier number 30, 30, 40, if the person who has 40 shares is not continuing after the first day of the company, those 40 shares go back to the company, right? And those remains paid up but not allocated to the other two founders. Now, understand how the maths work when the ownership is defined. When all these three were there, the company was 30%, 30%, and 40% owned. But when this third guy left, the other two guys have 30 shares, but they both own 50%. So I think, Raj, this is a little longer discussion. And I think it's a little complicated and it's very specific to scenarios and the individuals and the team that is building it. That is going.
Hey, Sunil, go ahead and finish your presentation. We can take questions one-on-one later, just so that we can get you a chance to finish all your slides.
Yeah.
Thanks, Anand.
Okay. So moving forward, I think now comes the more of a personal stuff. I am actually very excited talking about it because one of the biggest thing is I never had a chance to talk to all of you at this length. Sharing what I have done over the last so many years, and it's a great opportunity. So I have very, clearly stated it's exploring new terrains and challenging the status quo. That's how I have evolved over the last few years. Of course, there have been ups and downs. The life has not always been easy, both personal as well as professional. But I have, with every passing day, I'm trying to become a better person, stronger, and maybe a little more sensible. And that's what I'm trying to do. Before I jump onto my own farm, quickly wanted to have a, question on what do you guys think are these startups? I mean, have you heard of these?
Yeah.
All NITK.
Yeah.
Okay.
Brilliant. What about these?
This Arts of Missouri, Imbibe.
It's our class.
98 batch.
Awesome. This is all class of 98. And unfortunately, many of us didn't know that. So I think this is something we need to probably be doing more often. I mean, I think we should be using our WhatsApp group to enable people to talk about their own farms and business. That's a request. Sorry, I'm diverting, but that's what I would request. Okay, coming to my own story. I come from a very modest background. My upbringing has been in Kanpur and Unnao. Most of the people wouldn't have heard of Unnao. My birthplace is Jhansi. Spent just the first few years in Jhansi, then moved to Unnao, studied there. Then Kanpur. I studied Hindi medium all my 12th up to 12th class, and then I moved to. I did my BSc for a couple of years before I got into engineering. Some of my closest friends during those, 9, 10th, 11th, 12th, and some of them are still here. Rajneesh, Shailendra, and Rajneesh, I will be talking about for one other reason. So, coming from a modest background, getting into KREC was a very big thing. Coming from UP, there's a very high competition to get into engineering. I didn't really have many people in my family to look up to as role models. Did whatever preparation I could, and eventually cracked, the engineering in the second year of BSc. Left and joined. Rajneesh Shukla had already joined. So Rajneesh happens to be a classmate of mine and Shailendra. He is the one who influenced both of us. So Shailendra and I were studying together, and we together cracked engineering test. And Rajneesh took us, he took me and I think Shailendra both for the initial interviews. And he pushed us to select Suratkar. Not many of you would know Rajneesh was in the third year of college, mechanical, one of the brightest of the people that I personally know of, a very dear friend to both Shailendra and me. He went to engineering, one of the toppers, in fact. Many of you probably would have even had a few puff with him during college. He moved to Infosys. In fact, I'll talk about Infosys, and he was one of the reasons why I wanted to get into Infosys, because I was kind of following him, through KREC and then Infosys. Unfortunately, I'll talk about that later, but unfortunately, the day I got into Infosys, he was still there. But the day I was, in Infosys, a couple of months from then, Rajneesh left us. We met with an accent in Pune, and a big shock for many of us who knew him well. Very fun guy. Wanted to actually talk about him today because he's so close to me, and I'm sure Shailendra also has.
Yeah, he was 2 years senior to us in mechanical.
Yeah. So awesome 4 years at college. One of the best times in college, of course, wasn't as much into studies, or I still managed to clear with distinction, but my time was more on the sports field. So had a great time. Had some good friends, many of you. One of the things that I came to the college with, coming from a modest background, getting a job was one of the top priorities. So we didn't really have strong finances. Getting a 10,000 rupee job itself was a big dream back then. Mechanical companies were still offering 5, 6, 7, 8,000 rupees a month. MBA, MS was a distant dream. just sponsoring engineering itself was a little challenge, and then could not think of anything else. Interestingly, happened to get through two companies, Halliburton and L&T. A very big decision. Some of you would know Halliburton, based out of Texas, I believe, and one of the largest in the oil rigs exploration area. And L&T, you can see the salary comparison. Halliburton 3.49, L&T 0.84. This was at college. I still remember the figures because it was a difficult decision to make. Chose L&T and joined L&T. Unfortunately, wasn't a great time because L&T, did not really care much for the interns. There was no learning and mentoring, no exposure, and I chose not to spend a lot of time with them. Spoke with HR, gave very strong feedback a couple of times that made them give some of us great opportunity to learn, but unfortunately, it did not happen. So the best time I had with L&T was with PJ. I'm not sure whether he's on the call. We played badminton, and that probably was the best time. A small group of friends, 8, 10, we had an awesome time in Vadodara. Some of us also enjoyed the Navratri there, which is actually started today. Infosys, moved to Infosys. This was a dream. Interestingly, when I was at KREC, I wasn't, allowed to write Infosys test. And the reason was I come from, the UP board, which is a Hindi medium. Getting a, 70%, it's very tough in Hindi medium. I was, I think having good marks, but somewhere in the maths, I faltered, interestingly, and I had, I think 67, which made me less than 70% in 12th. So that did not, go well with Infosys. They were looking for people with more than 70% of the marks to clear the test, to appear for the test, and they did not allow me. I still had that in the back of mind. I knew that they would allow people to write from outside. I went to L&T, did some prep, and then fortunately, I was given a call for a test in Mumbai, cleared the test. This was all Shakuntala Devi. I still remember clearing those aptitude, puzzles. Selection happened. Interestingly, the hike was quite good from 7,400 roughly L&T to I got almost 14,000. I don't remember, I think 128 or something. So almost double the salary. Awesome time, moved to Bangalore. Good parties in Bangalore, brilliant group of people. Bought my first bike within 6 months, Yamaha 135. Had some fun. We can talk over beer one of these days. Sorry, can you please remove the beer when you're clearing up? So we shouldn't be going here. Okay, so but had a good time, great exposure, great learning, growth. When I joined Infosys, they were, I think about 4,000 people. I was in 7,000 employee number 7060. When I left them, they were already 88,000 people. This is 2007. So in 8 years, they moved from 4,000 to 88,000. You can imagine the kind of exposure and the growth people got who were there during the 90s and early 2000s. I was fortunate to be chosen to meet NRN based on certain parameters, and had a, I still remember my one-on-one with him, almost 45 minutes. One of the most memorable things at Infosys. Had opportunities to stay back in US, was in US at many places during my Infosys stint. Never wanted to live abroad for long. Always I went there, I spent time, I saved a little, but I think I was always having this, weak link back home. Wanted to be staying close to my family and mom and brother. So never said yes for GC, never wanted to settle abroad, and so I rejected GCs. 2007 was the first time when some of me and my Infosys colleagues, we all were itching to do something on our own, and this is when you hit those midlife crisis time frame, mid-30s was approaching, and we said, okay, why not? We ventured into setting up our own farm, Sujan Software, back in 2007. We were focusing on India. We are trying to offer technology services to India purely on the development. We came together, ex-Infosys, in fact, our manager was also there. We started on trust. There was no founders agreement. There was no understanding who will take how much salary, how much money will come in, whether somebody will get paid or not. Nothing. I think we just started saying, okay, let's get in, let's get going. We took a 3-story building, 100 people capacity in the first couple of months. Of course, we started from a 1 BHK. I think we spent 2-3 months in that 1 BHK with about 4-5 people. We did the setup there, grew to about 7-8, and then we took up a larger 3-story building, 100 people capacity. Reached to a 40 people team in maybe about a year's time. We had raised some capital. This is 2007-8, more from friends and family. We had actually tapped into the clients like SBI, Jet Airways, Ujjivan, some of you would know, so financial services firm, Kotak Bank, Emphasis on the IT side. So a reasonable start, but for whatever reason, I think there were different learnings there. We probably were a little ahead in time, selling IT services in India. Just understand, we were talking about .NET and Java, so very restricted. This is where I'm covering here, lacked flexibility and innovation. We were very restricted, saying we'll only do this. And we said we will not do anything beyond this, mainly because the people who came together, 4 or 5 of us, we all were coming from .NET, Java, or program management sales background. So this is the only thing that we could do. And we said, this is what we will do. We will not go beyond that. And we didn't want to pick up that low-end maintenance work, which was coming in loads from the US. So this is where we were, having a struggle ahead of time, because, when I still remember one of the instances, went to Mumbai to sell a solution to a farm in close to Thane. I forgot the name of the place. We went there. It was a manufacturing company, and we sold it to the CTO, the IT person. There wasn't anything like CTO back then in manufacturing. So IT head, we sold it to him. He was excited with what we were bringing. He said, talk to the procurement and they'll do the negotiations. And we went and spoke to the procurement guys. And they said, so how much is the pricing? We said, well, it's about 17, 18 lakhs. And they said, how much time will you take? And we said, maybe about 2 months. And the next question was, well, how would you deliver it? We said, we'll actually develop it in our own premises, and we will bring it here. We'll spend 2-3 days with you, and we will bring it on a CD and connect it to your servers, deploy it, test it with your team, and once it's done, we are done. Piece of work. He looked at us, and he said, really? I mean, you're actually going to work for 2 months on something. You will build it, deliver it on a CD, and you're asking me 18 lakhs. And we, 3 of us were sitting in the room, and we looked at each other like, what is he talking about? Is he expecting us to bring a truck load of software to deliver before he gives us, so it should enter the gate, and then he will give us the 18 lakhs. So it was a funny incident, but I think that actually summarizes what we were going through back then. And IT was still picking up. One other challenge which we had, we actually depended a lot on our trusted network, because we all came from 10, 15, 20 years with large firms like Infosys, we thought we could leverage our network or the clients to build the business. Unfortunately, we never thought that we have to be on the road day in, day out to sell. We were actually waiting, or we were just dropping emails. And so but I think the CEO and me and all of us. So we were failing on that. We never ventured and sold. So we never looked for clients who we could sell our solutions. As you could imagine, I mean, we made significant investment here in acquiring a 3-story building when we actually reached a 40-people team much later. So we invested a very large capital in acquiring that building. And in fact, I still remember we were probably burning, we're giving 2 lakhs rent per month for this 3-story building. Now that was 2 lakhs plus we had electricity plus security guard 24/7, cleaning and so on and so forth. So imagine spending almost 2.5 lakhs a month when you didn't really know where the business was. I talked about the trust and the no founders agreement. We did not have a very formal agreement, the shareholder agreement among ourselves. And in the interim, when the money became tough, one or two guys defaulted, and they said they had a understanding. Can't disclose a lot, but they did talk about that with our founder, the CEO. And they made some arrangement where one or two of them were getting salaries, but other two were not getting salaries. In fact, one was getting salary, the other three were not getting salary. Now, this resulted in a big trust deficit among ourselves, because all of this should have been discussed in the board meeting, or if there was no board, at least it should have been discussed as a team, making sure everyone was on the same page. None of us really had deep pockets back then. We had put money. More than that, we had actually put in our time and effort. So that caused a lot of damage in the entire relationship. And I chose to move out because I was also going through some other things on the personal side. So that was a time when I moved out of this, and I joined another firm. Now, again, on the personal side, I did not really have so much of sales and business experience coming in from IT. Was doing more of IT services, delivery, etc. There was lack of financial stability, and of course, there was lack of family support. So I wanted to talk about these as well, because especially about entrepreneurial journey, these are so critical. You should know what you can do. You need to sell. You need to understand how to run a business. You have to have financial stability, and you need to have a family support. This is so critical for you to venture, and if you don't have this, you will not be able to go too far. Would spend just a few minutes here talking about the rebuilding years. Joined Cognizant. I packed my Sujin and Infosys experience very well. Was picked up for account management role, moved to Zurich, spent a few years there, in fact 1.5 years. In first 12 months, I grew the business extremely well, was given very high ratings by the clients, by internal organization, and so on. In fact, I happen to be the top account managers in a group of almost 7, 8 who were already there for many years. My motto to my team, it was a very big team. Many of them were actually there for many years. I told them either grow or go. And that also caused a lot of damage, because people were so comfortable living in Zurich, having a good life, and making money. No pressure, coming in at 9, leaving at 5. When I came in with a hunger of a startup, and I said, I have to grow. And I didn't realize that this was established organization and not necessarily a startup where I could push people to achieve more. There was great rewards, recognition, everything, but there was politics. And I chose to leave them. Learned a lot, great exposure, international client, did fairly significant portfolio, leveraged that. I stuck to my values, and I said, okay, I'm not the right fit here. Huge politics. I can't talk about specific, because that is about certain region in India, and so on. So I wouldn't go into those details, but there's regional politics. There is, other cultural issues and so on. I realized that professional world wasn't as professional, and I thought, what would I do? I took a few months break after Cognizant before I ventured into Synchron. Joined them, coming with such a good background and experience. I was taken in, I was offered. And one other thing which I missed talking, that whenever I ventured into new areas, especially after Infosys and Sujin, I always made sure I never followed people. I never looked for, Godfather. I always want to start on a clean slate. Because that allowed me to play on my strengths. I did not want to be feeling that, yeah, I think if I'm trying this, somebody will question me. I actually wanted to try everything when I ventured in. I did exactly the same thing when I joined Synchron. Went into a completely unknown territory. They offered me a very large portfolio. In fact, their largest client. They said they'll give me half of it based on my past. When I joined, they said, well, we are still thinking, I waited for a couple of weeks. They took their own sweet time, and I said, okay, guys, I'm leaving. went home, spent a couple of weeks back home, and I said, don't pay me salary, don't pay me anything. I've already spent a few months after Cognizant thinking, what do I do next? Don't want to get into this, this whole thing again. Eventually, they called me to New York, and they said, okay, we have a large portfolio for you, and they presented me to one of the very prominent financial services organization, Broadridge. They said, well, they need some help. Can you help? And they put me there in a PMO role, which was quite a, return to what I had done. Picked up from there, and within a couple of months, I told them, okay, there was an account manager who was managing this portfolio, a smaller portfolio. I said, you move out, I'll make sure I'll manage everything apart from my role. I had the hunger I wanted to achieve. I wanted to prove. I proved it. Within a year, they asked me to move to New York permanently, and they said, okay, we want you to do sales at Wall Street. So I started selling with clients like Morgan Stanley, Fidelity, Merrill Lynch, and so on, Goldman. Spent a few years there, and then I probably got good success, and I was one of the top performers. Again, was picked up by my CEO. He asked me, so there was a strategic account that we had won in Middle East, Mubadala, and before me, I think they had picked up a few guys who had faltered, and the client had actually threw them away in 2-3 months' time. My CEO asked me to move there, and that was a new area again, and I picked up. I spent 4.5 years. And I was very successful with the client and grew the business. Huge cultural shift. Just imagine somebody moving from New York to Middle East, and that to an IT person who never would imagine moving to Middle East for IT. I did that. I learned. I grew. I adjusted. I made people understand what I bring to the table, who I am, and how I can. I think it was a cultural shift for me, and as well, I think for Middle East people, because they look down upon most Indians, and I think I did not let that happen. So I think that was a big pushback from me, and I think that really paid very well, and I could sustain for 4.5 years. Later on in the career, I realized that I had already set up the managed services and all, but last years of that, I wasn't really learning. It was all about managing employees, clients, nonsense. Somebody making a mistake, you're just trying to do it on your own. Realized that I didn't really have another role model in the company, which I always wanted. I'm somebody who's looking to learn all the time. I think there are things I can learn from people, from situations, circumstances. I also got married around the same time in Synchron, at my better half. I gained financial stability. I also had a dream, which I did talk about earlier here during KREC. I could never do an MBA or MS, and I did try that, once when I was with Infosys, but then I never wanted to do GC, so I never attempted it in US. I tried that again when I was with Synchron. I applied to NYU and all. I think there's some discussions going on, but for whatever reason, I moved to Middle East, and that again is what happened. So I eventually, it was a little late in the career to go for a full-time MBA, opportunity cost as well as the value add, but I still wanted to make sure I had the right brand with me. So I did a executive program with IIM Ahmedabad, and that kind of partially fulfilled the MBA dream that I took a 6 months break after Synchron. I mean, of course, you can imagine having my life partner and financial stability, and not so much to worry about. We both decided that we will travel. Took a 6 months break, August 2017, and that's the time I also wanted to spend time, study, and travel, and understand what I plan to do next. Excellent break. Spent a lot of time studying startups, and started making some investments and so on. And that's when I realized that I think if I have to do Sugen, I should do it before it's too late. That's when I jumped in. And this is a very relevant, quote that I figured out. If you don't build your dream, someone else will hire you to help them build theirs. Brilliantly said. If you don't really have the courage to do what you want to do, somebody else will actually. So I have been someone who is kind of, I wouldn't call it rebellion, but somebody who would who stood up when I needed to. And I had the courage. I think this is exactly what I'll talk about in some time. Came back to India in 2017. Coming from IT, either you could do tech or sales or delivery. I never wanted to delivery. I never enjoyed. I'm pretty good with client engagements and all. I can do a lot of sales pre-sales. But being in India, this wasn't a possibility. And if I really had to do it, I could always do it for myself. So some of that was going on, but I never wanted to build an IT organization. Having spent 20 years, didn't want to get into the Java and all. So started doing angel investments, started advising startups, and started figuring out what do I do next. As you can see here, always wish to build a farm. I have been passionate about creating employment, whether it be for one person or 10 or 15. And I want to work with good people, and I want to build my own culture. These things are very important for me, I think, because what I've seen in my past experiences, the corporates are built, they lack culture, they don't care for employees, and so on. So I want to build a little different culture, and that's what pushed me to get into this. I always had areas where I could do better. I gained those over the years. I got exposure to global sales, business experience, client facing, and packaging, positioning of the relevant solutions. Refresh with IMA, refresh with the startup ecosystem. So I had the skill sets and the education to enter in. I made sure that I had finances, so I did plan for that with a vision that I would probably review that in a few years' time. I did have the family support, so my wife was very understanding. The moment, in fact, we had just got married, and I told her that, what, though we are doing this very well here, we are in Dubai, we can always move to UK. I had an offer from UK, London. I said, do you want to move to London or Dubai, or I can also negotiate, but I would actually want to move back to India because I want to spend time with my mom. And then I think life in India is, many times better when it comes to house help and trying things and so on and so forth. We have enough finances, so the lifestyle will not be impacted. She was very understanding. She supported, and I left my job. As I said, took a few months break. Came here in August 2017. Spent a few months doing back and forth between India, Dubai. We also traveled east and a bit of west. And then we settled in Gurgaon. I was always in Bangalore and Pune, but wanted to be in Gurgaon, mainly because I come from Kanpur, so wanted to make sure that I'm not too far away from my hometown to be able to travel overnight. This happened, I think, started the firm, and somewhere, Raj, the question that you asked about funding team, etc., or somebody you asked. So I went through similar issues, started Imbibe. When I moved in, when I first came up with this idea in September 2017 or October 2017, I had a couple of my colleagues who wanted to join hands, and they said, yeah, we all will venture in. I still remember sitting in a coffee shop in Pune and registering the domain name Imbibe Consultancy, and I actually bought all other relevant domains so that nobody else could, cause trouble. And we started building the business model, and then the founder conflict started because nobody wanted to leave the job. So both of them took a decision that they didn't want to come in at least for 6 months. The second person said, no, I would probably be not in for at least a year. And then they both had restrictions on how much money they would put in or how long they would commit in. Unfortunately, when you're coming in a startup, you can't come with too many terms and conditions. If you do that, then you're actually setting yourself up for failure. It was a very hard time. This was 2017, October, November, and I gave them time till January, February, because I was still an NRI, and I said, okay, I'll probably register the firm in April of 2018. So you have time until January, February, make a decision, come back to me. If you can do it, great. If you can't, then I'll go solo. I was a little disturbed back then because I think, you spend few months and you come up with a team, you come up with an idea, you think, this is what you're going to do, and then there's a setback and the team is actually not coming with you. I started thinking, what do I do next? I was investing in firms. InQSpace is one of the firms I invested in, and they also offered me CEO roles. I was supposed to join them, but this entrepreneurial thing was kicking in, and I just could not get accustomed to having a CEO. So didn't want another manager to be telling me, I need you here at 9 a.m. I said, enough of it. I wanted to do it on my own. I said no to him. I continued to be invested there. Of course, I pulled out later, but much later, for a couple of years. But I think I did not join InQSpace. However, I never wanted to go to the market saying I'm a single solo person. I always wanted to have a team. I spoke to a few people. I figured out who could be the right partners. I did not really find anyone good. I spoke to a couple of guys and I said, I'll give you a fraction of equity, but I need your name to be associated with my firm. I launched the company and all by myself. These two guys are ex-colleagues of mine from Infosys. I leveraged their name as managing partners on the website and all my sales materials. I always position saying we all are coming from a top consulting background and we can do this. So the packaging positioning was all great, and I never position as I said, an individual, always a company. I started looking for right hires, and this whole thing, just imagine, took me almost a year because I left in August 2017. By the time I could close the team, I think it was already May or June of following year 2018. Spend next 6 months, preparing the sales material, etc. Now imagine I was building a finishing school or skill development, but when the team did not come, those were the technologists, they did not come. I had to pivot. Just imagine, even before starting the farm, I pivoted. I moved away from finishing school and skill development. I said what I could do. And I figured I could do consulting. I could advise the startups and SMEs how to build a farm because I was already doing it here with my angel investments. Started doing it, picked up a few clients on my own, started engaging people on part-time basis. I gave them assignments. Somewhere I personally got involved, I delivered. In January of 2019, I got the first 3 hires. Interestingly, 2 of them were startup founders. They came to me for advisory, which I was providing. They liked my advisory so much. And interestingly, I also told them that what they were building was not the right product. They said, okay, if we can't build a product on our own, we will join you and we'll build it together. They joined me. The other person, he wanted to learn startup, he joined. So this is how the first 3 hires came in. I did not offer any job to them. They just wanted to work with me because what they saw was some value that I was providing. They came in. I did not want to hire, but I said, okay, I'll give you a pocket money, some amount, and then if you stay, I'll give you equity, and we'll build it together. I gave them first few months, so they joined in January. I gave them almost 6 months to try out different ideas. It's just not them. I gave all of us enough time. We tried many things since I was doing angel investments. I thought there would be many like-minded people like me who would want to get into the angel network. And I started reaching out to people in our network, made a mistake, reached out to people outside as well. But again, I think I didn't really test it enough. I tested it as I spent time on it. I realized that I was spending time, but ROI was very low. People were spending, small amounts, 5 lakhs, 7 lakhs, 8 lakhs. And I was probably talking to 10 people to convert one. That was not worth my time. And that was a big thing. These 3 guys were continuously involved, exploring other areas. We looked at e-bike sharing rental. We did a lot of market study on this. We looked at colleges. We said, okay, since we are in the startup advisory, we know where the pain points are. We went ahead and we said, we'll help you build better incubation centers. We did a couple of advisory. We also reached out to Government of India, Ministry of External Affairs and all, even to set up some things outside India, try to leverage some connects there. But all of this did not move forward. Spent a few months studying the SME P2P lending. We knew that this was, fintech was hot. Unfortunately, we were too small for a fintech game. we realized, so I was the only one who was probably at that point in time ready to bring money. Even now, probably that's more or less true. But did not have enough to, build this kind of a business. To give you an idea, SME P2B lending requires license from RBI, NBFC license from RBI, and it can be anywhere from 2 CR onwards, 2 CR to 5 CR. I think this is about 2 CR, this is 5 CR. And then if you have to build this business, you have to have a capital of, in my opinion, at least 100 crore, which you can lend before you can build the business. If you're starting with a 10 CR capital and you're probably making, a fraction of a percentage and you have to pay it back, there'll be a cost of capital and so on. The money that you will make will not be enough to sustain. So if you're getting into this, we realized we weren't really there. We could not have done this. We looked at co-living, food, beverages. So you must have realized that, we spent, from August 2017 to almost mid of 2019, almost 2 years, I was busy doing this. Almost 2 years. And in between, of course, we were doing great startup advisory. We were getting a lot of startups that were talking to us, but they had no money. We spoke to almost 800 plus startups in 18 months period. We got a few consulting engagements. They were always looking for free advice, which we could do to some extent, because that's anyway sales and pre-sales where it has to convert. Very difficult time, but I did not have a very big team. I still was 70 people mid of last year. Managed without even, having enough revenue. Growth advisory is another area which picked up. This is where we did another pivot. If you see, this is the first one. We were doing the Bedrock Angel Network, and we realized that the angels probably were paying too small. And the people who were coming for angel, they were probably looking for 50 lakhs once a year, and funding wasn't interesting for us. We moved to seed and VC, started building network, and spent a lot of time. As of today, we have, connect to, I wouldn't say all, but I think a large number of VCs and seeds. We can directly reach out to them with our deals. And there are a lot of, deals in the pipeline, about 8 or 10 startups that we are currently working on. Of course, some of them also are my own industry firms, but some are actually raising funding. To give you an idea, I think we have access to, for example, Surge, Ferrari, and Room, and a lot of different people basically. Then somewhere in mid 2019, since I came from the consulting background, I said, why don't I build upon that? So eventually, again, I went back to what I did here, what I could do to take it forward. And I think that's where I again got into AceNet. We launched a platform, AceNet. Now, AceNet is effectively, I looked at the people of our age. If you look at the, folks our age, what we are struggling with is we have reached a level in our career where growth is very difficult. Many of us have not been learning the new skills over the last few years. We are all very expensive. So not many companies need us. You must have realized this in IT services and even in other sectors, especially with COVID, this has become very difficult. Many of us are willing to work part-time because we have probably made enough money, and we want to work on our own ideas or startups. We also want to try out different things. We don't really want to work on what we did earlier in the last few years. We want to work on something which is totally different. We learn that, I've taken that effort to learn that new skill and test it out. So our target market rather was, people who were with 15, 20, 30 years experience. And this actually went very well. And our positioning has been fairly strong on this because these kind of people can also service startups. Just imagine, I can bring somebody with 30 years experience in the batteries, and he can talk to you to help you build your startup. Now that's the value, you can bring. Same thing happens with SMEs, we can do that. So we realized that that's exactly what the startups were looking for. This has picked up very well. And even the corporates were looking for this. We also got some initial interest from firms like Nomura and Deloitte, because interestingly, Nomura has built exactly same model within their organization where they have a set of experts with top expertise offering services. So there was some discussion happening with Nomura on the partnership. I wouldn't say which area, but yeah, there's some discussion happening. This is still on, and we'll see where we go with that. So Nomura, Deloitte, all these companies could be potentially be our clients as well as partners in some ways, and of course other corporates. So effectively, what we're bringing in is next gen on-demand expert platform. When I say on-demand, you don't necessarily need to hire a person, full time. We're also bringing a technology solution into it, which is still in work in progress. Where if you need somebody even for an hour, you can take that 1 hour advice and pay $100, $150. And these guys are actually bringing very top end expertise, their in-depth knowledge of the area. And this is a network-based model, so it's an asset-light model. I don't have a lot of people on my payroll. Even today we are fairly small. I think about 15 people, 15, 16 that we are as of today. But if you look at the network, we have 250 people who are having an average 15 years experience in our network. A lot of them, of course, are from IT, but then I think maybe about 100 of them are from other sectors. So whether it is, let's say, healthcare, edtech, or fintech, I will be able to get somebody who can advise. Some of them are in a full-time job, but they're willing to spend some time. We have also built some connects with the technology consultants here, who are willing to work with us, some smaller firms. Won't spend a lot of time here. This is more of a sales, but I wanted to give you a flavor of how we evolved from here, how we evolved AceNet. So pivot, and continuously tapping into the business and ensuring that we seek customer feedback and figure out where the value is, where we can go. As you can see, in the second inning, it's still bootstrap. I think the only other money which has come in is from my other partner, who joined me late last year. Just to demonstrate commitment, he invested in the company. Leadership team, all very experienced people. Most of us are 15, 20, 30 years experience. For example, the CTO brings 30 years experience in the firm. So there's a kind of people that we have committed, aligned. We are all willing to work on reduced salaries. To be honest, I did not take any salary the first 3 years, though it was on paper a very small amount because Indian banks weren't giving me credit card when I moved back to India. I had to show a number on my salary. I paid myself some small amount. I got the initial credit card, which had a very restricted spending, but with my increased spending, they realized that irrespective of salary, he can manage large credit limit. Now I'm at a fairly high credit limit. That's a funny thing, but that's how I started. So reduced salaries, ESOPs is what leadership team is with. Employees looking for attitude, and analytical mindset because we do consulting. A lot of exposure and learning to the youngsters that we offer, rewards, recognition. I'm talking about some of it because this is exactly the part of the startup or entrepreneur approach. What are you trying to build? What value are you trying to build? Bring to people. Culture, client first, no margin is okay, but I think the brand name has to be established. Flexible, evolving business model, play on strengths and create a niche. Very frugal. I did talk about salaries and expenses. Definitely was impacted with COVID-19. In consulting, you sell half the time, you deliver the other half the time. But in COVID, there was no selling, no delivery. Clients were just closing their funnel. And we had tough time for a few months. However, we did not do any pay cuts. We did not do any layoffs. I personally used time to refocus on what we could do. Of course, we were doing startup advisory and some of it, but a lot of this was actually, I would say ad hoc work or short-term assignments, 2 months, 3 months. We had to continuously sell. I realized that we needed to build the long-term revenue funnel. That's what we did. We looked at the long-term engagements, and we also started looking into IT. We realized that the revenue was critical. We had to build the team. And interestingly, some IT companies reached out to us for specific advisory. We We did extremely well. I personally started, selling in May. I was on road starting in May, June. And in fact, I closed my first long-term deal in June of this year. And from there on, I think we have had extremely successful run, not in the world for the last 5-6 months. We have already crossed, doubled our last year revenue in the last 5 months itself. And I think the way things are looking, my gut feel is we probably will be 10x ARR compared to last year by March this year. I mean, as I said, I have 15, 16 people today, but we probably will be 30, 35 people by March this year, plus a lot of other external consultants. So already cash flow positive, which is again a big thing which has happened during COVID. So why I wanted to talk about all this, so, from outside, many of you would think that this person is doing a great job. He's having fun building a startup. Startup is always about learning, challenging yourself, surviving, pivoting, building it again from scratch, and never stopping to dream. So I think that's what I've been doing. I would probably pause here for a few seconds just to take your questions before I venture into my angel journey. I'm trying to move fast considering the time. I think already been 2.5 hours. We'll try to shorten.
So, Sunil, what helped you during COVID to get into this long-term engagements?
So I think our positioning was good. We were actually providing value to the client even earlier. And some of these engagements were being discussed previously and clients were delaying the discussions. But when they struggled during COVID, they realized that if they don't change their business strategy or their overall marketing and all, they would probably be closed. And that's when they said, okay, can you guys help us change ourselves? So we did that. We picked up a few clients. The D2C also helped. Customers were looking for us to provide them digital solutions. So that also helped. That's where the IT came in. Also during IT, some large IT firms or mid-sized IT firms, they started getting a lot more business from US and Europe, especially within healthcare sector and financial sectors. They ran out of good senior staff who could manage the growth, and that's exactly what AceNet brought in. I just talked about 15+ years experience. We have a lot of guys with very strong execution, program management expertise, and that again gave us a lot of push. So these were the 3 big factors. Already established business positioning, clients struggling with their own growth. Of course, that made them behave differently during March to May, but then they had hunger and they came back later. And IT is another area which helps.
And how confident are you? Because you said target to double the team size and 10x year-on-year AR growth. So how confident are you on that?
So March 21, I'm relatively confident, because I know the pipeline, I know the kind of discussions that are happening. So I'm very positive, this will happen. Of course, I mean, there are surprises. I've lived through surprises for the last so many years, so that's perfectly fine, but this is what I'm looking for.
So great story.
Well, question on the pivot from, you said originally you had AceNet as a database of experts. And then here in this slide, it sounds like you go further than just bringing in the experts, including delivery. Is that right?
Yeah, so AceNet is actually bringing people together to deliver, right? And we are bringing expertise, and it is effectively short-term or long-term engagement. So you can engage us for an hour. I mean, you in the sense, my client, if they need an hour with me, I'm happy to spend time. But if they need me or my partners or experts for 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, I'm more than happy to do it. And that's exactly what I changed, because initially we were doing a lot of work on the startups. So just imagine talking to 3 different business startups a week. I mean, if I can tell you, last week I spoke to a legal, compliance startup. I spoke to an FMCG company, and I also spoke to an edtech company. All these startups are looking to engage us for some of the other things. Now, one side is that interesting, exciting stuff where you're learning, you're actually providing advisory. The second side is making sure your business is stable. And that a lot of it is coming through this long-term engagement in IT. So engaging people on the longer term will also be quite beneficial. And many of these experts are quite happy looking for long-term engagements, and especially people with 15, 20 years. I think there are larger layoffs happening across the board in a lot of corporates. And just imagine if I have to sell myself as an individual, it will be so difficult. But if I have 50 of us, coming under one umbrella, and that umbrella is having a sales team, and the sales team is selling on behalf of all 50 of us, I think it would be a much easier sale. And that's exactly what AceNet is all about.
And do you think, looking ahead into the future, this is a new innovative take on how consulting businesses have been built, like people like, Accenture, or the big consulting folks like McKinsey and people like that?
So thank you for bringing up that name. When people talk to me, many times I say I'm actually trying to build a mini McKinsey or a smaller McKinsey or a refined McKinsey with a different business model. So I'm sure many of you who have been part of the consulting world, you know that you actually get people with one person who comes in as a partner with 10, 15 years experience, and the rest of the people probably are 2 years, 3 years, and they try to provide consulting. What we are bringing in is top end experts, and most of them are senior guys. So you actually get value. If you have to bring your junior guys, you bring your own guys, and if you need, we can bring. But what we're offering you is the real expertise. So yes, the Accenture and all are starting to think. Nomura, I already said, they wanted to engage us to build an extended relationship so that they can tap into our network.
That's great. Sounds exciting.
Too late. I think it's already 11:40. I'll probably spend a few minutes quickly talking about one of the pieces of my journey. So angel investment, I keep doing angel investments. I started doing it mid 2017. Made a few investments starting from Edugorilla, SpaceMax, TerraGo, Buy Financials, didn't list all of them here deliberately. I think a great experience, of course, one other thing which I want to highlight here, I don't invest in stocks. So I pulled out of stocks in 2007 when I started my first firm, or rather 2008. And from there on, I have not ventured back into the stock market. I may have some SIPs going on, which is again a waste of money, in my opinion, because I think most of the SIPs are not giving me any returns. So I'm spending more on startups or in my own company. That's what I'm putting at. My criteria for picking up startups typically has been the founders who are actually serious about their business and they know what they're doing. Some are passionate, may not be so much aware of the business, but if they're passionate, trying to solve a problem, I get in. I do seed stage investments. Typically, try to pick up, slightly reasonable percentage, not like 0.2%, 0.1, but slightly reasonable percentage at seed stage when the valuations are low. Few learnings from my angel investor, investment experience. Not all founders' businesses are same. A few aren't as serious as you would expect them to be, and you need to manage your investments just like you manage investments in the stock market. You need to be relatively engaged with these investing companies. Talk to them, but don't try to take over. That's a mistake. So don't try to spend too much of time because they will eat up into your personal time, and if you're trying to do something else, you won't have time. Especially just imagine if you have sizable portfolio and you start spending 2 days with each of these, your entire month is gone. So it's a very balanced approach. Gets a little tricky at times because some of these guys prefer never to report to you, on any of your financials, any of their performance parameters. Some actually do over communication, so a little difficult to manage it. Be ready for surprises and burns. Of course, there are people who end up, spending money where you don't want them to, but I don't think you're running the business. Few cautions, when you're angel investing, don't just write a check. This is something I tell every new person, don't just write a check, write it off, because there's no guarantee that the money will come back. Typically, people look for a very high return startup, as a high risk and probably a high reward investment, but chances are very low. So be ready that the money that you're writing off probably will not be back, and that's why you do risk diversification by spending in multiple companies. So if one or two do reasonably well, you probably will be able to secure an investment. But never take a very big bet on one single company. And definitely look at your financials. Don't just think that everyone else is doing it, so I'll do it. Check your appetite before you do it. There are capital gains on startup investment, which we'll just spend a couple of minutes here. I come from a very strong value system, and that's what I brought up here. I'm willing to take risk. I'm willing to, I'm not afraid of losing. I know I can build it again. Fairly honest, transparent in my dealings, no nonsense. Sometimes it may be a little arrogant and direct, but probably it has happened over the last few years when I learned a few things. I value time, so I'm very careful about when I'm spending time. I build relationships, and I keep relationships for forever. For me, relationship values and reputation are much ahead of money. So that's how I am. Enjoy startups. I have already spoken a lot. I am involved in this IT startups. I've conducted a couple of events for them. Been invited to a few events. I'm continuously learning people, business, life every day. Invest in and care for people. A positive is my blood group, and that's how I am. I'm a positive person. I don't try to be positive. I am a positive. That's how I see. Stay away from negative people, negative thoughts. If something which is pressing me down, I try to come on top of it. Will be blunt at times and telling people, this is not right, and that's how I also deal with my clients. Fairly self-motivated. I love all days, Sundays, Mondays, all of the same for me. So that's what it is. Quickly, anyone who's looking to build a startup, first of all, figure out whether you're building a social enterprise or a for-profit company. Don't try to build both together. Check whether there's a market for the product or service. There is nothing, so there's a statement by Peter Drucker, there's nothing so useless as doing efficiently something that should not have been done at all. So basically, don't try to build something which was never required. Check whether the competitors, there is something uniqueness in your product, service. How quickly can you come up with an MVP, launch it, and get customer feedback? Don't try to spend too much of time continuously building on it. If you have to fail fast, fail cheap. Don't burn too much of time and money and effort in building something which is actually not worth the market selling. First mover advantage definitely is advantageous, but sometimes it can be disadvantageous. So be careful, but don't hold back your MVP thinking somebody else will copy and so on. Make sure you get the paying customer. If you don't find the paying customer, your business is not. I'm not spending a lot of time keeping time in mind. I think I've already taken a lot of your value. Is the idea scalable and is the business model sustainable? Think big in a startup. If you're thinking of building a company which is just let's say $100,000 or 50 lakhs, 75 lakhs, I don't think you should venture in there, because that's the kind of money you will anyway make in your job. So try to build something which is scalable and something which you can deliver with a team. If you're trying to do something on your own, I think it will never be. Don't always rely on family and friends to build large businesses. You have to find other customers, outside customers, to build a scalable, sustainable business. Question that keeps coming up: scaling profitability versus growing at any cost. We're seeing it every other day. I think, in my opinion, there has to be a balance. I would lean towards profitability when I'm building a business. I would lean towards growing at any cost when I'm targeting valuations. That's the next thing: value versus valuation. In my opinion, value, because I have the values myself. Look at the resources, suppliers, partners you need. Figure out how much money you need. How long can you survive? Plan a longer runway. I mean, I'm certain 3 years is a minimum that you should commit if you're starting out. Am I ready to commit time and capital? Make personal. I think you need to ask these questions yourself. Do I need an exit strategy? And when somebody asked me earlier, I don't think you should have an exit strategy. If you're venturing in at this stage, I think you should think of a retirement with what you're building. If not, I'm sure you will anyway go back. So don't think about an exit strategy. It will happen when it has to. And give time to your business because gaining customer confidence is very, very time consuming. There are a few dreamers and stories, of our class of 98. I think some of you were asking who are these people. I just tried to cover a few. Apologies if I missed a few names. So Achaf Mesur, Vijayanand, Ayan Tools, Vasant, Brokers, please excuse Ken, Imbibe, that's me, Newgen Systems, the young baby on the block, Nitin Sharma. Over to you too, Nagesh Kamath. I think Nitin is starting something very interesting, by the way. He has, spun off his last business as one. So I think just check on it. Very interesting stuff that Nitin is into. Over to you to Systems. Nagesh is doing Questro, Sachin, Seven India, Praveen and Rohit. Sujan again, me, my last company, Test Outlook. Yellow Spark, Madhukar. I'm sorry if I missed any of the names. So this is it. Any of you whose names are here, if you want to share your own experience based on what I just talked about or anything else, please do. I'll go quiet now. Happy to take questions. This is pretty much end of it. I do have a few slides in the appendix. I wanted to, just keep them in the appendix so that if any of you want to understand a little more about, some of it, you can. There's a lot of material available online that you can use. Before I close this, I think special thanks to the team that has actually made this KREC MasterKlass. This probably has been the best outcome of the WhatsApp group so far. What we need to see where we can take this and maybe even these startups next. Also want to thank Ken for his inputs in improving these slides. So thank you all and thank you for your time. I'll go quiet. Happy to take questions now.
Solid.
There are still 24 people awake. Nice.
Some of them are not in are not in India, okay. So that helps, I'm sure.
I didn't think I would take almost 3 hours to do this.
Well, it's not over yet because I'm going to call you right after this.
Good one, yeah, Sunil. I think the fact that there's so many of those startup journeys that you have gone through, man. It's not just one, So, like you put it, pivot after pivot, probably landed up with the long list of tries and hits. It's amazing, yeah. Well, I guess Ken has a couple of more, but for me, I mean, starting with the one that too in a domain that I actually was involved, I find it so hard to, survive. So amazing that you have been able to do that consistently. I think right after Sugen, right? I mean, 2007, you kind of more on a startup mode.
Yeah. So that is so true. So great. I think if there are no more questions, maybe we are pretty much done with this.
Sunil, thank you for spending the time. And especially your personal journey was very interesting to listen in. And like Sachin said, all the pivots and all the twists and turns were very, very interesting to hear. Thank you so much for spending this time with us.
Yeah, thank you, Nagesh. In fact, I mean, nice of you and everyone else who's driving this.
Thanks,
Sunil. Thanks, Sunil, for great session.
Thank you all. Thank you for your time.
Thanks, Sunil. Thanks. Bye.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Awesome. Keep rocking, man.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.